Thin slice judgment window. You walk into a coffee shop. Someone catches your eye for maybe 2 seconds. Their posture, the way they hold their cup, a micro expression flickering across their face that you don't even consciously register. By the time you look away, your brain has already made a verdict, maybe or no. That split second is your thin slice window, and it's doing more neural work than your entire first conversation ever will. Research shows people form hard judgments about attractiveness, trustworthiness, and compatibility in pure milliseconds before a single word gets spoken. The wild part? Those snap verdicts stick like glue. They color everything downstream. The tone you deploy, which jokes land, how much of your real self you're willing to show. If the thin slice said no, you'll hear their laugh as dismissal. If it said maybe, that same laugh becomes an opening. What makes this sneaky is that thin slice judgments aren't pure static. They're pulling from real patterns your nervous system has learned over years. Confidence, alignment, actual energy in their body, but they're also running on incomplete data and inherited assumptions you didn't choose. Someone might completely miss your thin slice checklist, but could rewire how you think about attraction forever. The move isn't to pretend your gut reaction doesn't exist. It's to stay awake to it while it's happening. Notice the judgment firing, then pause and ask, is this really about who they are, or is this about what I expected walking in? That one question is the only thing that actually gives you a choice in what happens next. Anchoring the first impression. You walk into a coffee shop 5 minutes late, hair a little wet, apologizing before you sit down. That apology, that small, nervous gesture, becomes the frame through which they interpret everything else about you that night. They're not seeing you. They're seeing you minus punctuality, you who is scattered. That frame is the anchor, and it sticks harder than you'd think. Anchoring works like this. The first thing someone notices about you, or the mood you set in those opening minutes, becomes the reference point for how they measure every move after. Show up stressed and hurried, and your later jokes land as deflection. Show up calm and warm, and the same jokes land as charm. The jokes didn't change. You did, or rather, the story they're telling about you did. Here's what makes this dangerous. You can't outperform an anchor. You can't undo it by being brilliant 10 minutes later. Instead, it colors how they interpret your silence, your laugh, even your choice of drink. A confident person ordering water looks health conscious. An anxious person ordering water looks nervous about the bill. The real move is simple, but requires planning. Decide what you want to anchor before you arrive. Not fake, not performed, just clear about which version of yourself you're showing up as. Do you want them to feel safe, show up present, phone away, eye contact, steady from hello? Do you want them to feel spark, arrive with lightness, a half smile ready, energy that suggests you're already having a good night? The anchor isn't manipulation. It's knowing which version of your truth you're leading with, and that version will shape everything they remember about you long after goodbye. Halo effect from one trait. You walk into a room and someone makes you laugh, really laugh. 10 minutes later, they say something objectively mediocre, a recycled joke, and you still find it charming. You're not hearing it fresh anymore. You're hearing it through the glow of that first laugh. That glow is the halo effect, and it's running your dating life more than you know. One bright trait, confidence, humor, beauty, intelligence, becomes a lens coloring everything else about them. They're generous because they're witty. They're thoughtful because they're beautiful. They're trustworthy because they make good money. Your brain stops gathering data and starts confirming a story it already bought. Here's where it gets sticky. The halo effect doesn't just make you overlook red flags, it actively prevents you from seeing them. Controlling behavior reads as protectiveness. Arrogance reads as self-assurance. Selfishness reads as confidence. You fill the gaps with the best possible interpretation because the halo does the work for you. By the time reality cracks that shine, and it always does, you've invested months into a version of them that never existed. The move isn't to kill attraction or demand perfection, it's to notice when you're doing the halo thing in real time while it's happening. Ask yourself, what am I assuming about this person I haven't actually seen? What behavior would I read as a genuine flaw if they weren't funny, beautiful, or successful? That pause won't ruin anything real. It just protects you from falling in love with a story instead of a human being. Mere exposure familiarity curve. You walk past the same cafe every morning. The barista's face registers. Then it becomes comfortable. Then, without ever speaking, you feel something almost like connection. That feeling is not love or deep compatibility. It is mere exposure, and it's running your dating life whether you know it or not. The brain loves what it knows. Show up in someone's orbit enough times, and familiarity rewires their perception of you. That text you send at 9 p.m. every Tuesday. That Thursday evening you're always around. That consistent vibe. Your brain is not trying to convince them you're perfect. It's just making them feel at ease around you. And ease is a gateway drug to attraction. The catch is timing and calibration. Too much exposure too fast feels smothering. Too little and the curve flatlines before it peaks. You need to find the rhythm where someone sees you enough to feel comfortable, but not so much they stop noticing you. This is why disappearing for a week after intense texting can reset attraction. You drop off the exposure curve and suddenly you matter again. The danger zone is the middle. Enough exposure to feel routine, but not enough to feel essential. If you're dating someone and things go flat, it's often not lost interest in you. It's that you've hit the boring part of the familiarity curve. The move is to deliberately create micro gaps and small surprises that keep you on the upslope. Consistency without novelty becomes furniture. Novelty without consistency becomes a stranger. The sweet spot is showing up reliably, then occasionally stepping back into focus. Propinquity and repeated proximity. There's a reason the person you once dismissed starts looking better every time you see them at the gym. Nothing about them changed, but your brain did. Psychologists call this propinquity, and it's the quiet engine behind attraction that has almost nothing to do with who someone is and everything to do with where they are. Your brain doesn't distinguish between familiarity earned through genuine connection and familiarity earned through habit and geography. Show up enough times in the same orbit and something shifts. The coffee shop regular becomes magnetic. The coworker across the hall becomes someone you suddenly notice. The person in your Tuesday night class becomes someone you wonder about. Repetition and nearness rewire what feels possible, and the trap is that propinquity works on anyone near you long enough, not just people you should actually date. You can fall in love with proximity itself and mistake it for chemistry, wrapping the accident of geography in the language of fate. Your brain is excellent at constructing narratives that feel true. 6 weeks of sitting near someone doesn't mean they're your person. It means your mind has made them familiar, and familiar feels like home. The antidote isn't to avoid closeness or routine. It's to develop the small but crucial habit of asking yourself whether you're drawn to who this person actually is or simply to the fact that they keep appearing in your line of sight. That one question, asked honestly in a quiet moment, can save you from chasing proximity instead of connection. Nearness is powerful. It's just not the same as love. Reciprocal liking amplification. A text comes back in minutes, and suddenly the person doesn't feel like a stranger anymore. They feel chosen, intentional, like they saw something in you worth responding to. That shift is reciprocal liking amplification, and it rewires attraction faster than almost anything else. Here's what happens. When someone shows genuine interest in you, your brain doesn't just file it away as neutral data. It bumps up how much you like them, not because they're suddenly more interesting than before, but because your mind assumes that if they recognize something good in you, they must be discerning, must be worth liking back. It's a cognitive shortcut that feels like logic but isn't. The trap sneaks in quietly. You start believing this feeling means something was already there between you two, simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't. The attraction often builds after they respond, not before. They text back thoughtfully. They remember something you mentioned. They ask a real question instead of sending an emoji. These aren't signs of deep compatibility. They're just signs someone was paying attention at the right moment. But your nervous system lights up the same way either way. It can't tell the difference between they care about me and they were listening. So next time that rush hits, try this. Pause and ask what you actually knew about them before the response landed. Not what you've decided since, but before. The gap between what you felt and what you knew, that's where this bias does its clearest work. Knowing it exists doesn't kill the spark, it just makes you honest about where it started. Pratfall effect of charm. You've probably noticed that the most magnetic people in the room aren't flawless. They're the ones who can trip over their words, laugh at their own jokes before the punchline lands, or admit they wore mismatched socks to a dinner they thought mattered. When someone who seems confident or attractive makes a small, harmless mistake, it makes them feel closer, more real, more human. We assume perfection creates desire, but it actually creates suspicion. Nobody trusts someone who never stutters, never spills coffee, never says something awkward 3 hours later, and cringes alone in their car. Perfection reads as either inhuman or like someone's trying too hard, both of which trigger a wall that hardens with every flawless word. But a small, genuine stumble, it says, I'm comfortable enough with myself to let you see the actual thing, the one nobody performs for. The trap most people fall into is trying to weaponize this. They perform vulnerability, manufacture mistakes, or confess something relatable that's really just a humble brag dressed up. That kills the effect instantly because people can smell calculation from a mile away. The real move is letting small, actual mistakes breathe instead of rushing to cover them up with explanation or self-deprecation. When you say something dumb and just pause and laugh at it, you're showing competence and ease at the same time, the rare combination of knowing who you are and being okay with the gaps. That's what gets remembered. Beautiful mess effect. You've probably noticed that the most magnetic people aren't the ones with their lives perfectly arranged. There's something about someone who admits they're figuring it out, who laughs at their own mistakes in real time, who shows you the actual seams of their humanity. And suddenly they're harder to look away from than the polished version ever could be. This is the beautiful mess effect, and it works because perfection reads as untouchable. It creates distance, but a real, visible struggle owned with some self-awareness and humor does the opposite. It says you're safe enough to be honest around. It says you don't need to perform. That vulnerability becomes the very thing that makes someone attractive. Because attraction isn't just about flawlessness, it's about feeling like you can actually reach them, like there's a real person on the other side and not a filtered image. The trap is confusing this with actual dysfunction. The beautiful mess effect doesn't mean showing up late, being emotionally unavailable, or using chaos as an excuse. It means letting people see your genuine work-in-progress status without shame. It means saying, I'm working through this instead of pretending you have it solved. It means your imperfections are visible, but your effort is visible too. When you're dating, resist the urge to be the finished product. Let them see you trying. Let them see you fail at something small and get back up. That's the moment most people actually fall. Not when they see your best self, but when they see your truest self handling a moment with some grace and humor. That's unforgettable. Benjamin Franklin favor effect. Benjamin Franklin did something counterintuitive in his political career. When he wanted someone to like him, he asked them for a favor instead of doing one first. And it worked. The person he asked ended up respecting him more, not less. This sounds backward until you realize what actually happens inside someone's head when they do you a favor. Their brain has to justify the effort. If I just spent my time helping you, I must care about you. I must think you're worth it. So your mind rewrites the story to match the action. You don't help people you like people you help. The shift is subtle but total. Now flip this to dating. If you're always the generous one, the planner, the listener, the one who remembers their coffee order, you might accidentally become the giver, the safe one, the friend. But if you ask for their insight, their opinion, their help with something real, they have to invest. They have to decide you matter. Their brain starts working to justify why they said yes. Suddenly, you're not a nice option, you're someone they've chosen to care about. The catch is authenticity. A fake ask reads as manipulation and kills everything, but a real one asking for their thoughts on something you genuinely wondered about or admitting you could use their take on a situation triggers something deeper. You're not performing generosity, you're giving them genuine skin in the game. They become part of your story instead of just an audience to it. That investment becomes the bond. Liking gap after conversation. You leave a date thinking it went fine, maybe fine. You felt stiff. They seemed kind, but distant, so you don't text. 3 days later, they reach out first. Turns out they were home replaying the same conversation, convinced you weren't interested, finally risking the message anyway. What you both missed is the liking gap. Research on this effect reads like dark comedy. Two people leave a conversation and almost always assume the other person liked them less than they actually did. You held back because you were nervous. They read it as cool distance. They were self-conscious about something they said. You missed their anxiety and thought they were bored. The gap isn't small. In some studies, people underestimate how much someone liked them by a stunning margin. Like you're both playing poker while staring at your own cards and imagining the worst about theirs. Here's where it gets you. You let the gap decide. You don't text because you're reading the room. You assume rejection before it happens. But the room was never yours to read. It was just two nervous people, both second-guessing, both leaving with less certainty than they actually felt. Most people spend the next week waiting for a sign that was never coming, when the sign is just your finger on send. The move is simple. Assume the gap exists and text anyway. Let them surprise you with how much they actually liked you. Most of the time, they will. Spotlight effect overestimation. You walk into a coffee shop 3 minutes late, shirt slightly wrinkled, and your mind floods with certainty. Everyone noticed. Everyone is judging. That person at the corner table definitely saw you mess up the door handle. Hours later, you replay the moment obsessively, convinced it damaged how that date perceives you. Here's the thing though, they probably didn't even register your arrival. Their attention was already consumed by their own phone, their own worries, their own inner monologue about whether they look okay. The spotlight effect is this brutal gap between how much mental space you take up in your own head versus how much you actually occupy in someone else's. You are the star of your own movie, but you're an extra in everyone else's, and your brain fights that reality tooth and nail. So you catastrophize the stutter, the joke that landed flat, the awkward pause. You build entire narratives around micro moments that the other person has already forgotten. Dating makes this 10 times worse because stakes feel high and vulnerability is terrifying. So your brain cranks up the volume on every perceived flaw. The trap is thinking more self-consciousness will fix it. It won't. It just feeds the spotlight brighter. What actually helps is reminding yourself that your date is far too busy worrying about how they're coming across to build a whole case against you over a wrinkled shirt. They're thinking about themselves too. The real shift happens when you genuinely believe that. You get quieter, less defensive, more present. And that presence, that actual ease in your own skin, is what people remember. Not the wrinkle. You. Illusion of transparency. You're sitting across from someone you like, and you're absolutely certain they can feel the warmth radiating from you, except they can't. That nervous laugh you think broadcasts charm, they're hearing anxiety. The comfortable silence you're basking in reads to them as boredom or disinterest. Here's where it gets brutal. You feel so genuinely present, so honest, so utterly there in your own skin that it seems physically impossible they wouldn't absorb what's moving in your chest. But they're not inside your head. They're watching your face, parsing your tone, and filling the silence with their own insecurities, past rejections, and what-ifs. This gap between what you feel and what actually arrives on their end is the illusion of transparency, and it tanks more promising connections than actual incompatibility ever does. You're broadcasting on a frequency only you can hear. What feels like unmistakable interest lands as ambiguous. What feels like thoughtful attentiveness comes across as emotional distance. The person across from you isn't rejecting your signals. They're genuinely bewildered because your internal world and your external presence are running two completely different scripts. The solution isn't subtle hints or hoping they'll figure it out. It's smaller and scarier than that. Speak what you actually mean. Name the nerves. Say, I like you and I'm rusty at this. Explain that your quiet doesn't equal disinterest. Most people are so starved for directness, so exhausted from guessing, that one clear sentence can completely shift an evening. Your transparency doesn't live in how intensely you feel or how present you are. It lives in what you actually say out loud. Misattribution of arousal. Your heart is racing, your palms are hot, you're breathing faster. In that moment, your brain doesn't care why. It just knows something lit you up, and if someone attractive is standing next to you, well, guess who gets the credit? You might think you're falling for them when really you're still buzzing from that run you finished, or the horror movie you just watched, or the argument you had an hour ago. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between I'm terrified and I'm excited, so it borrows the nearest narrative available, and that narrative is usually the person in front of you. The classic experiment proved it. Put two groups of people on separate bridges. One is boring and safe. The other is rickety and genuinely scary. Each group meets an attractive stranger. The people who met on the scary bridge reported way more attraction, rated the stranger as hotter, and were more likely to call them later. Their fear got relabeled as desire. In dating, This means anything stimulating, a thriller date, a concert, a challenging conversation, even anxiety about whether they like you back cranks up your arousal system. Your brain then whispers, "This must mean something. This must mean chemistry." But sometimes chemistry is just your amygdala on overdrive and your body confusing context for connection. The real move isn't to distrust attraction itself. It's to notice when your pulse is high and ask yourself with real honesty, is this person actually doing something to me, or is it just the environment, the stakes, the adrenaline? That pause alone can save you from mistaking intensity for actual compatibility. Duchenne smile detection. Watch someone's face when they laugh at your joke versus when they're laughing out of politeness at a party. See the difference? One reaches the eyes, the other doesn't. That crease at the corner of the eye, that tiny muscle called the orbicularis oculi, it doesn't lie the way the mouth can. A real smile, a Duchenne smile, activates those eye muscles involuntarily. Your brain doesn't have to think about it. Fake ones, just the mouth moving, flat eyes, gone in a second. Here's what matters for you. Most people can't fake this convincingly, which means when someone's eyes light up around you, it's genuinely real. They're actually glad you're there. No performance, no mask, no hedge. And on the flip side, if you're wondering whether someone actually enjoyed that date or was just being polite, pay less attention to the smile itself and more to whether their eyes crinkled. Did they hold it? Did it feel lived in and present, or polished and quick? The Duchenne tells you when someone has dropped their guard, when they've stopped managing the impression and just reacted without thinking. This is especially useful early on when people are still performing versions of themselves, testing what lands. That genuine eye smile is rarer and therefore more valuable than most people realize. It's a small tell that says, "I forgot to be careful around you for a moment." That unmeasured response, that split-second crack in the armor, is when you actually get to see who they are beneath the date mode presentation. Pay attention to when they stop monitoring their face. Pupil dilation contagion. Your pupils dilate when you see something you want. Wide eyes mean interest, attraction, arousal, your nervous system broadcasting desire before your mouth catches up. But watch what happens next. When someone sees your pupils widen, theirs dilate in response, even if they don't consciously notice it. It's like emotional echo. Attraction becomes contagious at a level below language. You've probably felt this in a conversation that suddenly shifted. Neither of you said anything different, but the air changed. That was pupils talking to pupils. In dating, this matters because the person across from you isn't just reading your words. They're reading your body's automatic response to them. If you're genuinely interested, it shows. If you're faking it, your pupils know the truth even when your smile doesn't. The flip side is equally potent. When someone is drawn to you, their pupils widen. Your nervous system picks this up subconsciously and mirrors it back. Suddenly, you both feel more attracted. It's not magic, it's contagion. The practical edge here is real and worth noticing. Dim lighting amplifies pupils and makes them harder to read, so bright spaces level the field. More importantly, if you're on a date and you catch yourself genuinely curious about the other person, leaning in, wondering about their story, let that show. Your pupils will do the advertising. Don't kill it by overthinking. The people worth attracting aren't looking for performance. They're looking for the small, honest signals your body can't fake. Eye contact, triangle gaze. Watch someone fall into real conversation with you and you'll catch it. That flicker where their eyes drop from your face to your mouth, then drift back up. Half a second. Your conscious mind might miss it, but your nervous system doesn't. That small triangle traced by their gaze is one of the oldest biological signals we have, and it works because trying to fake it is nearly impossible. Your eyes naturally travel to the features you find magnetizing. When someone does this to you, it creates a quiet jolt of recognition that lands before thought. I'm being genuinely noticed. The triangle gaze isn't a learned trick or a manipulation play, it's a leak. When you're truly drawn to someone, your pupils physically dilate, your eyes rest a fraction longer than small talk demands, and they gravitate toward the mouth, that nexus of intimacy and vulnerability. The person across from you feels this shift without naming it. They just feel wanted in a way that's categorically different from polite attention. And here's the trap many people fall into. You can't manufacture this convincingly. Try to engineer the triangle gaze without real interest behind it, and it registers as performative. People sense the discord even if they can't explain why. The flip side holds too. Genuine curiosity about someone naturally produces this pattern without you strategizing it. The actual secret isn't memorizing eye movements. It's becoming the kind of person who's truly present and interested. When you're really there, your body's nonverbal language handles the heavy lifting. What people carry forward isn't your words, it's the feeling of being truly seen. Vocal pitch warmth signals. Listen for 10 seconds and move past the words to the actual texture of someone's voice. That's where the real signal lives. A voice that drops into a lower register, especially at phrase end, often signals comfort and genuine interest. Your nervous system saying yes without permission from the brain. Higher, tighter patterns usually mean nervousness or guardedness, which just tells you something real is happening underneath. The warmth you're tracking isn't about whether someone has a pretty voice. It's about relaxation. When someone is genuinely at ease around you, their vocal cords actually loosen and pitch naturally settles into a softer range. Women often lower their pitch slightly with someone they're drawn to. Men sometimes do the reverse, raising pitch slightly, a subconscious way of becoming less threatening, of softening the dominance edge. Here's where it gets practical. If someone is asking you questions and their voice gets warmer as conversation deepens, that's a reliable sign they're not just being polite or running through motions. If their voice stays tight or climbs higher, they're performing rather than connecting. Most people miss the real trap, thinking you can force this. You can't. Your voice betrays your nervous system before your words ever do. So stop trying to sound warmer and try actually relaxing. Lower your shoulders, breathe deeper, let your body settle. Your voice follows like a shadow. When you're listening to someone else, stop auditioning for their approval and start listening for permission. That moment when their vocal tone tells you they've stopped protecting themselves and started leaning in. Interpersonal synchrony and mirroring. Watch what happens on a good date when you both reach for water at the exact same moment. You lean forward, they lean forward. You're smiling and they mirror it back. And suddenly, it feels like you're dancing without music, without any plan. That's synchrony. And your nervous system is basically voting yes before your brain finishes forming the thought. When two people's bodies, voices, and rhythms align, the pace of speech, the tilt of a head, even breathing patterns, attraction and trust don't just creep up, they spike. It's ancient. A stranger who mirrors you feels safe because your brain recognizes itself reflected back. Here's where most people get trapped. You cannot fake it convincingly enough to fool someone actually paying attention. Forced mirroring reads as thin, greasy, like someone reciting lines they half memorized. People sense the gap between genuine echo and imitation the way you'd spot a song cover next to the original. The copy always sounds slightly off tempo. The real pull happens when mirroring lives so close to natural that you're not even aware it's happening, when you're synced without performing the sync. The secret isn't to mime someone like a parlor trick or a game. It's to slow down enough that real mirroring can unfold on its own. Rush it. Armor yourself, start performing, and your body won't match theirs because you're not actually present. But when you're truly listening, not scripting your next line or waiting to interrupt, your nervous system tracks theirs without conscious effort. That alignment builds something quiet and certain, the feeling that you two fit. Next time you're with someone, notice where you naturally synchronize without trying. That's where real connection actually lives. Postural expansiveness reads confidence. Watch someone you find attractive walk into a room and notice what happens before they say a word. Your eyes land on their shoulders first. Are they collapsed inward like they're apologizing for their own body, or are they open, moving through space like they belong there? Your brain reads that geometry in under a second and makes a call. Expanded posture. Chest open, shoulders back, limbs loose rather than tucked and defended, triggers something ancient. It whispers comfort. It suggests you're not afraid of being watched. It signals you occupy this room without apology. The opposite message lands just as hard. Crossed arms, hunched spine, hands buried in pockets, the whole body bracing for impact. That's anxiety made visible, and it's contagious. When you sit across from someone whose body is small and protective, your nervous system mirrors it. You tighten too, but when someone takes up space naturally, not aggressively, just present and grounded, you feel permission to relax. You trust them faster. You move closer. Here's what breaks the illusion. Size almost doesn't matter. A 5-foot person with an open chest and a long spine reads completely different than a 6-foot person hunched over. On your next date, pause in the first 5 minutes and feel your own body. Are you collapsed? Try expanding your chest without forcing it. Let your arms rest open rather than crossed. Lean back slightly. Watch what shifts in the room. They'll feel safer because you feel safer. Confidence isn't an emotion that comes first and changes your posture. It's a posture that creates the emotion. Touch, escalation, calibration ladder. Watch someone treat touch like a light switch. Zero contact, straight to a handhold or cheek kiss, and their date's nervous system spikes with alarm instead of anticipation. That jarring moment kills momentum, not because rejection happened, but because the body was never asked permission to relax into it. The ladder works backward from that mistake. It's a sequence of micro questions you pose to their body, each one small enough they can answer yes or no without theater or fanfare. Start with the wrist or forearm during conversation. If they lean in or don't pull back, you move to a hand on the shoulder during a laugh, then the back while walking, then the outside of their leg under the table. Each rung is tiny. Each one gives you real-time feedback before you go further. Their body tells you everything, whether they settle into your touch, stiffen, or mirror it back onto you. That feedback loop is the entire conversation. Most people skip steps because impatience or fear pushes them too fast, and they trigger alarm instead of desire. You're not sneaking past their defenses, You're building a language of consent that neither of you has to verbalize. If warmth doesn't happen at step 2, that's not failure. That's crucial information telling you to hold your line and stay present instead. Respect the signal and you stay interesting. Push past it and you become someone they avoid. The calibration ladder turns touch into something mutual, attentive, and giving them real choice at every moment. That's what makes you unforgettable. Scent compatibility signaling. You know that moment when someone walks past you and their smell lingers in your head for hours afterward, not because they're wearing expensive cologne, but because something about it just fits. That's not romance movie magic. Your nose is running a compatibility scan without asking your brain's permission. We're drawn to people whose natural scent suggests immune system differences from our own, a biological signal that offspring would have better disease resistance. It's ancient software running on top of modern dating apps. Here's what makes it stubborn. You can't fake this at a dating profile level. A photo, a witty bio, even chemistry on a first video call. None of it accounts for the fact that when you finally meet in person, your body might reject them on a scent level before your mind even catches up. Some people smell right to you and some don't, and no amount of attraction to their personality will override that gut-level response. Women tend to be more sensitive to these signals, especially when ovulating. Their scent preferences shift dramatically, looking for genetic diversity as fertility insurance. Cologne, perfume, stress sweat, diet, even laundry detergent can mask the real signal, which means if you're serious about someone, you need real proximity before the neurochemistry vote is final. That first hug, that close conversation, it's not just romantic staging. It's your olfactory system doing work your conscious mind hasn't figured out yet. The practical move: don't let distance stretch too long before you meet. Skip physical closeness early on, and you might spend months chasing someone whose scent your body rejected from the start. Zygarnik open loop effect. You ever notice how a story that cuts off mid-sentence haunts you? Someone starts telling you what happened at dinner, then their phone rings, and suddenly you're stuck replaying that moment for hours, your brain grinding away, desperate to know the ending. That hunger for closure is the Zygarnik effect, and it doesn't just work with stories, it works with people. When you share something tender but leave it slightly unfinished, or you ask them a real question and then let silence sit, you're creating an invisible hook. Their mind keeps circling back. They wonder what you meant. They replay the conversation at odd moments. They get curious about the part of you that you didn't hand over completely. It's not manipulation, it's neurology. Our brains file away unfinished tasks as urgent. Completed ones blur into the background. In dating, this cuts both ways. Overplay it, and you become exhausting. A person who never quite lands anything, and people feel toyed with, but wield it with restraint. A conversation that ends with a genuine question about them. A moment you reference but don't fully unwrap. A story you leave slightly mysterious. You become the thing they think about when they're alone. You become the thread they want to pull. The real skill is knowing when to open a loop and when to close it. Share enough to be whole and honest, but not so much that there's nothing left for them to discover. Let them imagine who you might be. That gap between what they see and what they wonder about, that's where genuine attraction actually lives, in the space between knowing and wanting to know more. Peak end rule of dates. You had a mediocre dinner, okay conversation, the waiter forgot your drink order, and then on the walk back to the car, they made you laugh so hard you nearly tripped on the curb. That laugh is doing almost all the work right now. Your brain isn't averaging the date like some impartial judge. It's taking a weighted sample, the peak, the hardest laugh, the most genuine eye contact, the surprise, and the final impression, and calling that the whole story. Everything in the middle gets filed away as background noise. This is why people say it was great after a date with flat stretches as long as something lit up at the beginning or end. It's also why the person who walks you to your door, makes one more joke, or sends a text 5 minutes after you get home can shift the entire memory backward. They control the last frame. The peak end rule means you don't need to be flawless for 2 hours. You need to be remarkable at one point, genuinely present, funny, vulnerable, unexpected, and you need to leave them with something good. A real laugh, a confession that landed, a plan made together, an idea that surprised them. The math is simple. Front load something worth remembering and protect the ending like it's the only thing that matters. When they're lying in bed later thinking about you, they're not replaying the small talk. They're replaying the peak and the goodbye. Von Restorff distinctiveness principle. That person in the bright red coat showed up to 3 different dates, and you remember them. Not because they were the best dates you ever had, but because they broke the pattern your brain was bracing for. Your mind doesn't glue itself to what's objectively superior. It glues itself to what's weird in exactly the right way. That's the von Restorff effect, and it's running in the background of every first meeting you have. Most people follow an invisible script on dates, coffee, safe questions, mirror body language, predictable, which means forgettable, but slip in one sharp, unexpected move, a genuine compliment about something nobody notices, a moment where you completely drop the charm act and just laugh at yourself, a question that actually makes them think. And suddenly, you're not background noise. You're the one they mention to their friend the next day. The trap is thinking you need to be flashy or loud to stand out. You don't. You need to be distinctly you in a way that fractures the expected rhythm. The person who listens harder than they talk. The one who admits they're nervous instead of faking confidence. The one who picks an unusual restaurant because they genuinely love it, not because it photographs well. Your brain retains the outlier, so the real question isn't how to be charming like everyone else. It's how to be remarkable by being authentically different. Small asymmetries, unexpected vulnerability, genuine weirdness. That's what sticks in someone's memory 3 weeks later, not because you were perfect, but because you weren't trying to be. Contrast effect of prior dates. You've probably had that strange night where someone otherwise ordinary suddenly felt magnetic. Not because they changed, but because you just came out of a bad date. That is contrast effect in its purest form, and dating lives by it. Your brain doesn't evaluate a person on their own merits. It compares them to the most recent reference point. A mediocre restaurant feels luxurious if the last one was genuinely awful. A person who listens well feels like the most attentive human alive if you just sat through someone checking their phone the whole time. The person hasn't become better. Your measuring stick has just shifted. What makes this dangerous is how invisible it runs. You walk into a date glowing because the last 3 didn't work out, and suddenly, ordinary kindness reads as exceptional. You mistake relief for chemistry. You confuse better than the last person with right for me, and those are completely different things. People have lost themselves in that gap more times than they'd like to admit. Your emotional state is doing heavy lifting that you think is about them. The sticky part, you can't unsee this once you know it. So before you decide someone is special, Ask yourself if they're actually a good fit or if they're just standing in contrast to recent pain. Better yet, notice the dates where you felt excited despite good alternatives being unavailable, where the spark showed up on its own merit rather than by comparison. Those are usually closer to the real signal, and they're worth protecting because they don't depend on how badly the last thing went. Novelty resets dopamine baseline. Remember that giddy, electric feeling early in a relationship, the way their text made your heart jump, the way a random coffee date felt like an adventure? That wasn't magic. That was dopamine flooding your system because your brain was encountering new stimulus after new stimulus. Every conversation was novel. Every touch was unexpected. Your baseline was low, so the surge felt huge. Fast forward 18 months, the same person sends a text and you glance at it while making breakfast. The kiss is warm but familiar. The dinner happens on schedule. Nothing has gone wrong, but nothing feels new, so your dopamine stays flat. This is the silent killer of long-term attraction, not betrayal or boredom in the traditional sense, but the neurological ceiling you hit when someone becomes predictable. Here's where most people make a mistake. They think the solution is to find someone else to reset their baseline again. It's not. The reset happens when you introduce genuine novelty into the existing relationship, not grand gestures or manufactured surprises. Those wear out fast. Real novelty means trying something you've never done together, visiting a place neither of you has been, having a conversation that goes somewhere neither of you expected. It's curiosity, not performance. The dopamine baseline doesn't care about how long you've been together or how much you love someone. It cares about surprise. So if you want to stay the person who makes them feel alive, stay the person willing to discover something new with them. That's not romance. That's neurology. And it's entirely within your control. Stay curious and the spark stays real. Anticipation beats the reward. Your phone is silent, but your nervous system is burning. You replay the conversation, you check the time. You imagine what they might say. That waiting, that's where your brain lights up most, not the actual message when it arrives. Neuroscientists call this the dopamine prediction error, but you just call it agony, and it's doing something crucial in your dating life. When you actually get that message, the spike is real but brief. The anticipation was the main event. Your body held its breath for hours. The breath release lasts seconds. This is why people stay hooked on uncertain outcomes longer than guaranteed ones. A maybe keeps you spinning. A yes lets you rest. Here's where most people get tangled. They rush to close the loop. They text back instantly. They push for commitment. They eliminate the mystery. But the person who stays memorable is not the one who removes uncertainty. It's the one who maintains it strategically. When you're reliably interesting but never fully predictable, when you show up but don't over-explain, when you create space between moments of connection, you're not being distant or playing games. You're keeping their dopamine system engaged. The tension is where attraction lives. The moment you flatten everything into certainty and constant availability, you've already lost the thing that made them unable to stop thinking about you. Small moves, reply sometimes, not always, instantly. Share pieces of yourself, not your whole story at once. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let some questions linger unanswered. The not knowing is what glues you to their mind at 3 a.m. Dopamine dip after certainty. You've been texting someone for weeks. The chase electric, every notification a small hit. Then you define the relationship. You're official. And suddenly, 3 days in, you notice the texts feel routine. The butterflies are gone. You start wondering if you chose wrong. But here's what's actually happening. Your brain was flooding with dopamine during the uncertainty phase because uncertainty triggers reward anticipation. The not knowing kept your system alert, hungry, alive. With certainty, that anticipatory dopamine cuts off. There's no more mystery to solve, no more will they to chase. Your baseline resets lower, and what felt thrilling now feels ordinary. Most people interpret this dopamine crash as a sign they're with the wrong person. They get restless, they pick fights, or they start looking elsewhere, chasing that neurochemical high they felt during courtship. But that dip is normal. It's actually a feature, not a bug. Your nervous system is supposed to calm down once safety is established. Think of it like the difference between riding a roller coaster and sitting on a couch. One is exciting, one is restful. Both have their place. The people whose relationships actually last are the ones who understand this pattern and don't mistake the absence of fireworks for the absence of love. The real trap is panic searching for the next spark the moment things settle. Instead, let your system recalibrate. The sustainable kind of intimacy builds in the quieter phase, when you stop performing and start choosing each other repeatedly in smaller, steadier ways. That's where depth lives, and it's worth waiting for. Hedonic adaptation in romance. Remember that month when every text from them felt electric, when they wore that shirt and your stomach flipped? 3 years later, the same shirt is just a shirt. Same person, same effort, but your nervous system doesn't fire anymore. That's not love fading. That's your brain doing its job too well. It's called hedonic adaptation, and it's the reason the honeymoon phase ends, not because they changed, but because your baseline shifted, your nervous system recalibrated. What was once a miracle became the new normal. The danger isn't that you stop feeling, it's that you mistake familiarity for loss. So you start hunting for the spark elsewhere. A new person, a riskier text, an argument that feels more real than peace. But here's the real thing. The fade is not a failure of love. It's actually a feature of attachment. Your brain is telling you something safe has formed, something stable. The sting comes when you fight it by chasing the high instead of building on the stability underneath. The couples who last aren't the ones still dizzy at year 5. They're the ones who learn to feel love differently, not as electricity, but as choice, as showing up, as the weight of someone's hand you've held 1,000 times. That's not less, it's just quiet. And quiet is harder to fake, which is why it matters more. If you're feeling the fade right now, don't panic. Feel it fully. It means the foundation might actually be solid enough to build something real on. Peak novelty versus deep comfort. Think back to the first month of a relationship, that dizzy electric feeling when everything they do feels new, when a simple text lights up your whole day. Your brain is flooded with dopamine because unpredictability is a drug. You do not know what they will say next. You do not know if they feel as much as you do. That uncertainty keeps you sharp, keeps you checking your phone. Then something shifts. Maybe 6 months in, maybe a year, the mystery fades. You know how they laugh. You know what they will order. The excitement flatlines and suddenly people panic, wondering if the love was ever real or if they just chased the high of not knowing. Here is what most people get backwards. That early peak is not the goal. It is the trailer. Real attachment lives in knowing someone can see you tired and frustrated and still want to be near you. It lives in the comfort of silence, in being bored together and that being enough. The trap is mistaking the absence of novelty for the absence of love. Your nervous system will genuinely miss that dopamine hit. But what grows underneath, the trust, The inside jokes only you two share, the way they know what you need before you ask, that is not less. It is just quieter. The couples who last learn to find aliveness in depth instead of surprise. You can weave small novelty into the familiar, but the real secret is learning to fall for someone because of their predictability, not despite it. Self-expansion model of attraction. Think about the last time you felt genuinely attracted to someone, not just their face, but their whole presence. Chances are they were teaching you something, a language you didn't speak, a way of thinking that cracked open your own. That's not romance as Hollywood sells it. That's the self-expansion model. You're attracted to people who grow you, who make you bigger than you were before. Psychologist Arthur Aaron noticed something wild. Couples who stayed together longest and happiest weren't identical. They were the ones who gave each other access to new identities. You don't fall for someone because they complete you. You fall because they expand you. This explains why the perfect match can feel boring after a while. Similarity feels safe, but it doesn't grow anything. Challenge does. A partner who drags you to museums when you'd rather stay home. Someone with a totally different friend group who teaches you how they think. A person who believes wildly different things and makes you defend your own, sharpen your own, not conflict for its own sake, real, warm expansion that feels like becoming. The quiet stickiness is this. If you want to stay attractive to someone long term, keep changing. Keep learning new things so you have new pieces to share, new angles to approach life from. And if you're choosing who to be with, pay close attention to who makes you feel like you're becoming someone larger than you were. That gravitational pull, that's not infatuation. That's the shape of a future. Michelangelo phenomenon sculpting. Michelangelo said he didn't create David. He just chiseled away the marble that wasn't David, saw the final form locked inside the block, and removed everything blocking it. That's exactly what happens when someone falls for you, except the marble is their perception of you, and every small interaction is a chisel stroke. You're not building a false version of yourself, you're revealing the version they suspected was there all along. The person you're dating isn't inventing feelings out of thin air, they're noticing real things. Your humor, your listening, the way you remember small details they mentioned weeks ago, and their brain is assembling these pieces into a picture of who you are. The psychological weight comes from something called the halo effect, tangled with what researchers call crystallization. Their initial attraction starts to explain everything you do. You laugh at something awkward, charming. You're quiet during dinner, mysterious and thoughtful. The same behavior that might go unnoticed in someone else becomes evidence of depth in you. Here's what trips people up. They think they need to perform or create something new, add layers, keep surprising. You don't. You need to be consistently, authentically yourself. The same person in week 2 as in week 8. The same in text as in person. Because every inconsistency is a chisel mark that cracks the marble. They're sculpting an image of you based on pattern matching. And if you keep shifting the pattern, the whole sculpture collapses. What they're falling for isn't a curated version. It's the real you, revealed slowly, confirmed repeatedly. Stay still long enough for the image to set, and the form doesn't just hold, it hardens into something lasting. Vulnerability, disclosure, reciprocity. You tell someone something true about yourself, a real fear, a past failure, a weird insecurity, and watch what happens next. The room shifts, their shoulders drop, they lean in closer, and suddenly they're telling you something real too. That's not coincidence. It's one of the stickiest laws of human bonding, wired so deep that therapists and dating coaches have built entire practices around it. When you go first with honesty, people feel permission to match it. Vulnerability creates a safe container, and most humans cannot resist stepping into one once it's offered. The trap is thinking this means you should overshare immediately or dump your whole history on someone new that burns people out fast. What actually works is calibrated honesty, small truths at the right moments, especially early on, a real thing about your day, an actual doubt, a genuine fear, not trauma dumps, just the small human stuff most people hide behind small talk and weather chat. The person across from you relaxes because they realize this isn't a performance, isn't a test, isn't you trying to impress them. You're not performing either, and suddenly there's space for something real to grow between you. The mistake people make is staying defended or bland, waiting for the other person to go first, hoping someone else will take the risk. But vulnerability doesn't snowball backward. You have to lead. And here's what matters. People don't forget the person who made them feel safe enough to be themselves. That's not attraction based on games or manufactured scarcity. That's the kind of pull that actually lasts, the one that turns a first date into someone who texts you back. Fast friends escalating questions. There's a technique researchers call the fast friends protocol, and it works like this. Two strangers sit down and ask each other progressively deeper questions for 36 minutes, and by the end, they often feel like they've known each other for years. The magic isn't in the questions themselves. It's in how fast you move from surface to soul. Most people on dates stay stuck at weather and work for the first half hour, building walls without realizing it. You ask safe questions, get safe answers, and leave feeling like you were both performing. But if you're willing to shift the tempo early, something shifts in the other person too. Skip ahead faster than feels comfortable. Move from where are you from to what's something you've never told anyone in the same conversation. Move from job titles to what scares you about your own future. The vulnerability is contagious, not in a manipulative way, but neurologically. When you ask a real question, the other person's nervous system registers that you're willing to take a risk first. They relax, their guard comes down. Suddenly, you're not two people performing for each other. You're two people actually meeting. The trick is timing and genuine curiosity. You can't fake the depth. Ask the harder questions not to impress them or rush intimacy, but because you actually want to know the answer. That authenticity is the fuel. People remember you not because you're polished or because you said the right thing, but because you made them feel seen faster than they expected. That speed of real connection is what sticks. Sensory-rich memory encoding. Remember the last time someone you liked touched your arm? You probably remember exactly what they were wearing, the temperature of the room, maybe even a faint smell. That is not luck. Your brain locks memories into place when multiple senses fire at once. A date at a restaurant with terrible lighting and frozen food might happen, but it vanishes. A coffee on a bench where you heard rain, felt a chill, caught their laugh, that stays. Most people think romance lives in conversation. It does not. Romance lives in what gets felt across all 5 channels at once. When you are with someone you want to stick around, your job is to deliberately break the sensory monotony of their normal days, not with grand gestures, with texture. Take them somewhere with a strong smell, fresh bread, rain, salt air. Choose places where they can hear something distinct, live music, waves, wind in trees. Let silences happen where the ambient sound does the talking. Hold their hand in a way that registers. Cold coffee shop, warm summer street. The sensory anchors you create together do something her brain cannot ignore. They file the memory under important. The person and the moment become fused to sensation, which means every sense becomes a trigger for remembering you. This is why people fall harder for someone they have walked through rain with than someone they have only texted. Your presence needs to be something their nervous system recognizes and craves to feel again. Make yourself part of the texture of their life, not just a story they tell. Context-dependent memory revisits. You meet someone at a loud bar and they feel electric. 3 weeks later, you run into them at a coffee shop and they feel like a stranger. Not because they changed, but because your brain filed them under bar person. That filing cabinet is context-dependent memory, and it's quietly reshaping every romantic connection you make. Your brain doesn't store memories like a video file. It stores them tangled up with everything around them. The music playing, the light, how much you'd had to drink, what you were worried about that day. When you retrieve that memory in a completely different context, the neural pathways light up differently. The person feels different. The vibe between you shifts because the setting shifted, not because they did. This is why someone can feel magnetic at a party but bland in daylight, or why a conversation that sparked something in a car feels dead in a kitchen. You're not lying about either experience. Your brain genuinely assembled two different versions of the same person. If you want someone to remember you vividly, don't just spend time in one setting, a coffee date, then a walk, then a late-night text conversation. Each context becomes a different file folder where you live in their memory. When they think of you, they don't pull up one flat image. They pull up a collage of moments. Boredom in dating often isn't about the person. It's about the memory being filed in only one place. Shake the context, and you shake their entire recall of who you are. State-dependent emotional recall. You bump into an ex at the grocery store on a gray Tuesday, and suddenly you're flooded, not with the whole relationship, but with the exact feeling you had the night they left. Your chest tightens, your voice gets smaller. It's not memory, it's your body remembering. That's state-dependent recall. Your brain locks feelings into the emotional and physical state you were in when they happened. So returning to anything close to that state brings the whole package back, unedited and vivid. A song from a breakup doesn't just remind you of what happened. It cranks you back into the neurochemistry of that moment. You're not thinking clearly. You're feeling the way you felt then. Same with a smell, a time of night, a tone of voice. Your new partner says something on a rainy evening that would normally be fine, but rainy evenings remind you of old fights, so you react as if the threat is happening now. You're arguing with a ghost wearing your current person's face. The trap isn't in feeling it, it's in believing the feeling means the threat is real. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between past danger and present safety. It just recognizes the shape of the context. But you can. Next time you feel a sudden surge, jealousy, rage, despair, pause and check the weather, the time, the sensory details around you. Ask yourself if you're reacting to what's actually here or to the echo of what used to be. That one moment of curiosity is enough to break the spell most of the time. Olfactory memory imprint. Your brain has a shortcut that words can't compete with. A specific cologne, the soap someone uses, the way their skin smells after a few hours. These aren't small details. They're neural anchors that fire directly into your limbic system, the part of you that makes decisions before your conscious mind even wakes up. That's why someone can vanish from your life for months, and then you catch a whiff of their scent in a crowd, and suddenly you're 17 again, chest tight, remembering exactly how their hand felt. Smell bypasses the thinking brain entirely. It goes straight to emotion and memory and desire. This is why people fall for someone's scent almost before they fall for their personality, and why, if the chemistry is right, you become chemically memorable to them too. Your own smell, the particular mix of your body chemistry, your deodorant, your shampoo, is actually encoding you into their brain every time you're close. They might not even realize it's happening. So here's the invisible move. If you want to be the person someone can't shake, be consistent with how you smell. Not overwhelming, not artificial, just recognizably yours. Let them get used to your particular olfactory signature. When they later catch that scent on someone else or on a random breeze, they'll think of you. That's not romance, that's neurology. The people who stick in others' minds aren't always the loudest or the most beautiful. They're the ones whose presence becomes a sensory anchor, a smell your nervous system learned to recognize as safe, alive, real. This is how you become the ghost in the room they can't forget. Music as emotional bookmark. That song from the bar on your first date, notice how it resurrects the whole night the moment it plays. Not just the melody, the nervousness, the light in their eyes, the specific way they laughed. Your brain tagged all of it together, and now the song is the key that unlocks the entire folder. This is why a breakup soundtrack slaps so hard. Music doesn't just accompany your emotions, it becomes the neural adhesive that locks them into long-term memory. You're not hearing a song when you hear your song. You're time traveling. Here's where dating strategy lives in this. People remember you more vividly when a song is playing during your moments together. Not because the music is magical, but because it gives your brain a sensory handle to grab onto. Silence is forgettable, noise is neutral, but a specific song, that becomes the bookmark your brain uses to file you away. Years later, someone hears those opening notes and suddenly you're as real as you were that night, even if you haven't spoken in years. The memory feels richer, sharper, more true than it might be otherwise. The sticky move. Pay attention to what's playing when you're together. Don't force it. But if something good is on, let it stay. Don't skip ahead. Your presence gets woven into the song itself in their memory, tangled with the lyrics, the tempo, the exact moment when they looked at you. That's not romance theory. That's neuroscience wearing a love song. And here's the quiet part. The person who understands they're memorable doesn't have to work as hard to stay unforgettable. Name, repetition, memory hook. There's a moment in almost every first conversation where someone says your name back to you, and something small clicks, like they're really talking to you, not just anyone. Your name is neurologically wired to your identity, your memories, your sense of being seen. When someone uses it in conversation, especially early and unprompted, your brain literally lights up different neural pathways than when they just keep talking. Say it 3 times naturally, not robotic, not obvious, but woven in, and you become someone they actually remember. Most people barely notice they're doing it or underestimate how much it matters. They say a name once at hello, then forget to anchor it again. But someone who gets this, they ask a question using your name. They reference something you said and gently loop your name back in. They're not trying to impress with repetition. They're making a subtle neurological mark that sticks. Humans are wired to pay attention to their own name. It's called the cocktail party effect, and it overrides almost everything else around you, cutting through noise like a signal meant just for you. If you're sitting across from someone and you sprinkle their name back into the conversation with genuine warmth, you're not being manipulative or playing a game. You're honoring the basic human truth that everyone, underneath everything, wants to feel like someone knows them, really knows them. Do it 3 or 4 times naturally across an evening and watch how much longer you stay in their thoughts after the date ends. Not because you were loud or flashy, but because you made their own identity feel important in your presence. Nickname ownership effect. Someone calls you by a nickname only they use, and suddenly you feel seen in a way that stranger you met yesterday could never manage. That small label, maybe it's something they noticed about you, maybe it's slightly embarrassing, maybe it's tender, becomes a bridge between you two. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. When another person names something about you, they are claiming a piece of your story. They are saying, I know you well enough to have a shorthand, a private language. You belong to my version of the world now. Psychologically, this works in layers because naming creates ownership in both directions. They own the right to call you that. You own the feeling that you matter enough to deserve a personalized word. Compare that to a first date where someone keeps using your full name like they are reading from a script. It feels distant, corporate, safe, but cold. A nickname, especially one that sticks, does something far deeper. It makes you feel less interchangeable, less like one of many. In dating specifically, the person who names you often feels more important than the person you name because they initiated the intimacy. So if you want to deepen attraction, notice what small thing is uniquely true about them and give it a gentle, affectionate label, not something mocking or mean, something that says, I see you and I like what I see. The nickname becomes a small ritual, a password that only you two share. That tiny linguistic claim, repeated across weeks and months, is often where real connection begins to take root and hold. Inside joke, memory anchor. You know that moment when someone laughs at something only you two would understand, and suddenly the whole world feels smaller and warmer? That's not accident. Inside jokes are neurological glue. When you share a private reference, a running gag, a stupid nickname, a story no one else gets, you're literally encoding shared memory. Your brain tags it as ours, not theirs. The amygdala lights up, the hippocampus files it, and every time one of you triggers it again, both of you get flooded with the exact same context, the exact same warmth, the exact same us feeling. This is why couples who crack each other up stay bonded even through flat patches. The joke isn't the point. The memory architecture is. You're building a private language that pulls you both into the same moment every single time. People fall for what they remember, not just events, but the feeling of being known. And the easiest way to be known is to be the only person who laughs at that specific thing in that specific way for that specific reason. If you want to lodge yourself in someone's mind, don't try to be impressive or clever in public. Instead, find the weird thing that makes only them laugh, the accidental mispronunciation, the way they always do something ridiculous, the dumb observation no one else noticed. Then keep it alive. Reference it, build on it, expand it. You're not just being funny, you're literally writing yourself into their memory in a way that feels private and electric. That kind of anchor doesn't fade. It gets stronger every time it's used. Benign violation theory of humor. You know that moment when someone says something totally inappropriate, maybe a dark joke about your job or a teasing comment about how you walked into the room, and suddenly you're both laughing so hard you can't breathe? That's not random. Your nervous system detected something mildly taboo, realized it was safe, and released all the tension at once. That's benign violation. A joke works because it violates an expectation, a norm, or a boundary just enough to surprise you, but the context signals nobody's actually in danger. The violation without the benign part is just mean. The The benign without the violation is just not funny. Dating hinges on this exact dance. The person who can tease you in a way that makes you feel seen, not threatened, has cracked something real. They're reading the line between, ouch, I like this, and ouch, I'm done. When you joke with someone you're attracted to, you're running a tiny safety test. Can they take it? Do they get my weird sense of humor? Will they laugh with me or shut down? The best daters are surgeons with timing. They know exactly how far to push before pulling back. A bad joke, one that lands as mean or one so safe it falls flat, breaks the spell entirely. But a perfectly calibrated violation, one that makes both of you realize you're the same kind of weird, that's when attraction suddenly has legs and momentum. The real skill isn't being funny. It's knowing your audience well enough to recognize what breaks their rules in a way that makes them feel alive, not attacked, genuinely seen by another person. Playful, teasing, calibrated risk. You know that moment when someone makes fun of you and it feels like they get you versus when it lands wrong and suddenly you're defensive. The difference isn't the joke, it's the permission you granted them to make it. Playful teasing works in dating because it signals confidence and comfort, but only if you've read the room correctly. Most people either never tease at all, playing it safe and forgettable, or they swing too hard and mistake cruelty for charm. The actual skill is calibration, understanding what makes someone laugh at themselves versus what makes them fold inward. Teasing works best when it's about something small and recent, not a sore spot they've mentioned 3 times. When you gently call out the weird thing they just said, the contradiction between their story and their logic, or their obvious nervousness, you're doing something powerful. You're treating them like someone strong enough to take it. That confidence is magnetic, but here's the catch. You only get to tease someone this way if you've already demonstrated genuine warmth. Tease too early and you seem cruel. Tease without kindness mixed in and it feels like mockery. The people who are hard to forget, they land teasing with precision because they genuinely like the person first. The joke is an inside thing, not an outside attack. Start small, watch their face, and notice whether they smile back or go quiet. That pause tells you everything about whether you've calibrated it right. If they reciprocate the teasing, you've opened a door to real intimacy, the kind where both of you feel safe enough to be gently funny together. Shared laughter, bonding metric. You know that moment when someone laughs at your joke before you even finish telling it, that split-second sync where you both catch the same absurdity. Your nervous system is already reading something real about whether they're tracking you long before your brain has the words for it. Shared laughter doesn't just feel good, it's one of the fastest biomarkers of genuine connection, and the science backs what your body already knows. When 2 people laugh together, their heart rates synchronize, their breathing patterns mirror each other, and oxytocin floods both bodies simultaneously. You're literally becoming physiologically entangled in real time. But here's where most people miss the signal. The metric isn't that you're both laughing, it's what you're laughing at together. If you both crack up at the same weird observation, the same absurd moment, the same perfectly timed silence, that's not coincidence. That's a frequency match. People who laugh at different jokes on the same date are polite strangers performing for each other. People who laugh at the same jokes are building something beneath the surface. The real trap is forcing it. Manufactured laughter kills bonding faster than silence because your body detects the fake immediately, even if you can't consciously name why. If you're trying too hard to be funny or laughing too hard at their jokes to earn points, you're creating distance, not closing it. The real tell isn't volume or timing, it's spontaneity. If you find yourself laughing without thinking, without performing, without checking whether it's the right moment to react, you're with someone whose rhythm actually matches yours. That's the person worth staying tuned to. Cognitive load kills flirtation. You're on a date and your phone keeps buzzing. Your brain is half on the conversation, half on whether you left the stove on, half on the anxiety spiral from earlier. You laugh at their joke a beat too late. They feel it. That delay, that fractional miss in rhythm, kills the spark faster than you'd think possible. When your mind is already full, flirtation becomes impossible because flirtation is the art of presence, the exact thing a crowded brain cannot do. It's not that you don't like them, it's that you're running on fumes mentally and they can feel the difference between someone genuinely tuned in and someone performing the motions. The brain has limited bandwidth, and when anxiety, planning, work stress, or distraction is taking up real estate, there's nothing left for the subtle back and forth that makes attraction ignite. You cannot simultaneously calculate how you look, worry about saying the wrong thing, monitor your posture, and actually be playful. The lightness that draws people in vanishes entirely. What feels like normal dating anxiety is often just cognitive overload masquerading as romantic failure. Before you spiral into "they weren't interested," ask yourself, was I actually there, or was I running 3 programs at once? This is why the best dates happen when you've cleared your schedule, not just calendar-wise, but mentally. Walk in with your attention already settled and unhurried, with nothing left competing for your mental real estate. The flirtation doesn't have to be manufactured then. It just lives in the space you've made for it, natural and unforced. Ambiguity, aversion, and signals. You text someone you like and get back "okay," and instantly your brain starts writing fiction. Are they mad? Losing interest? Busy? 3 letters shouldn't be enough to trigger your nervous system, but they do, because your brain hates the empty space more than it hates bad news. That's ambiguity aversion. We'd rather be certain something is wrong than sit with not knowing. In dating, this becomes particularly vicious because text, tone, and timing are always incomplete. A slow reply doesn't mean rejection. It might mean their phone died, they got pulled into work, or they're being intentionally spacious. But your interpretation machine doesn't care about logic. It fills the gap with the story that resonates with your fear. Someone who moves slowly in early texting gets labeled as not interested when they might just be cautious or genuinely private. Someone who doesn't use emojis becomes proof they're cold, not straightforward. The person who takes hours to respond transforms into evidence they're keeping you on a shelf. The trap is that you then behave as if your story is fact. You pull back, you test them, you text less, you read into their reading of your signals. 2 people start spiraling in opposite directions, both filling blanks with dread, both reacting to a narrative instead of what's actually there. The next time you catch yourself constructing disaster from silence, try naming it out loud. I don't know what this means yet. Sit with that sentence for a breath. Not knowing is uncomfortable, genuinely, but it's far cleaner than the story you'll build alone in the dark. Text response latency signaling. You send a message at 7:42 p.m. and they reply in minutes. Then you send another at 9:15, and this time the phone stays quiet for 3 hours. Your stomach tightens. What changed? Almost nothing, except the gap itself, and that gap is screaming. Response speed in texting is one of the loudest nonverbal signals we have because it costs almost nothing to reply fast, which means when someone doesn't, you're reading their actual priority, not their circumstances. If they've been quick most days and suddenly take hours, something shifted in how much mental space you occupy. It might be practical, a work crisis, a phone dying, genuine distraction, but consistency matters far more than isolated delays. Someone who always texts slowly, that's their baseline, not coldness. Someone who used to be fast and now isn't, that's a shift worth noticing. That's the one that matters. The real trap is spinning out over every 5-minute window like it's a referendum on how they feel about you. People are genuinely busy, phones die, brains fog, life happens sideways without warning. But patterns don't lie. If you're watching a slowdown paired with shorter responses, fewer emojis, less detail, you're seeing their investment shrink in real time. The inverse works too. Sudden speed-ups, longer paragraphs, quicker replies after months of delay, those signal something rekindling, interest opening back up. The move is simple. Don't spiral over individual gaps, but do trust what a month of texture tells you. Your intuition about latency is usually reading something real underneath it all, and that signal is worth taking seriously. Punctuation tone leakage, you send sounds good. 3 periods, they send back sounds good. 4 exclamation marks, same words, completely different rooms. This is punctuation tone leakage. The small marks you barely think about are broadcasting emotional temperature to someone reading you in silence, interpreting every dot and dash through what they hope or fear you feel. When someone shifts their texting rhythm with you, that's raw data. A period where they usually use nothing feels clipped, formal, cold. An emoji they've never used before might signal they're trying to soften something they know will land wrong. We're all reading between lines that aren't even there, filling silence with tone because text has no voice, no breath, no face. The trap is you're often wrong. A rushed ellipsis might just mean they're typing between meetings, not that they're frustrated or pulling back. But they're reading your punctuation the exact same way. Every time you shift from lowercase to capitals, ditch your usual emoji, or add a period where you normally float, you're leaking information about your mood, your distance, your defensiveness. Someone who likes you will catch it. They'll wonder what changed. They might even match your energy down, thinking they did something wrong. The real move is knowing what your natural rhythm actually is, the punctuation pattern you default to when you're relaxed and not thinking, and then noticing when you deviate from it, because that's when you're either protecting yourself or sending a signal you didn't mean to broadcast. Transparency illusion in texting. You send a text that feels perfectly clear in your head. 3 minutes later, they ask what you meant. You're confused. How could they misread that? The problem is that your brain filled in all the missing pieces while you typed. You heard your own tone. You felt your own warmth or sarcasm or urgency. They received letters on a screen with none of that scaffolding. Text is basically opaque, yet we treat it like it's transparent. A period at the end of a sentence can feel cold. A long paragraph can feel like an attack. An emoji that felt playful to you reads as mocking to them. The silence before a reply, which might just mean they're busy, becomes proof they're angry. What makes this sneaky is that you feel like you were clear. You were in your own nervous system. But clarity is not what got sent. Only symbols got sent. And symbols live in the other person's context, their mood that day, their history with you, what they're scared of, the fights they've had before. The human fix is not longer texts or more emojis. It's lowering your confidence in what text alone can carry. Save the big conversations, the apologies, the confessions for a call or a face. Text is fantastic for logistics and light touch. It's terrible for repair. If something feels tender or contested, move the channel. That small choice stops half the fights before they start because you're no longer asking symbols to do the work of a human voice. Voice note intimacy advantage. There's something that happens when you hear someone's actual voice instead of reading their words on a screen. The tone shifts. The hesitations become human. A two-sentence text that looks cold suddenly carries warmth when it's spoken. A micro laugh, a breath, the slight pause before they say something vulnerable. That's not psychology theater. That's your brain hearing proof of a real person on the other side, not just a string of characters. When someone sends you a voice note instead of typing, they're choosing inefficiency on purpose, spending more time and more risk of sounding awkward or boring. Your brain registers this as higher commitment than text ever could. Voice notes compress distance in a way typing never does. Reading feels like consuming content. Listening feels like someone thinking specifically about you while they recorded it, like their actual presence is playing in your ear. The intimacy gap between LOL okay and hearing someone say it with their exact inflection and personality bleeding through is enormous. You're not decoding symbols, you're hearing them think. If you want to stand out without trying too hard, use voice notes strategically, not constantly, which flattens the signal into background noise. But when something matters, when you want to be remembered differently than the crowd of text senders, your voice is a shortcut to feeling genuinely known. It's also a filter. People who ignore voice notes or never send them are often just not that engaged. Pay attention to who bothers with that small extra step. That's usually the person actually thinking about you in real time. Curiosity gap in messaging. You send a message and get back a one-word reply. You send 3 paragraphs and they respond with a question. The mismatch stings because your brain is already writing the story. They're losing interest, they're busy, they don't care enough. But what's actually happening is simpler and stranger. You're both caught in a curiosity gap, and whoever closes it first owns the next move. When someone doesn't give you the full picture, your mind rushes in to fill the blanks. They leave you hanging, so you lean in harder, invest more, text longer. That's the gap doing its work. The best texters rarely explain themselves completely. They ask instead of answer. They hint instead of expose. A message that ends with a question mark keeps you thinking about them after you've put the phone down. A long, wrapped-up answer lets you exhale and move on. This doesn't mean play games or withhold real connection. That's brittle and exhausting. It means resist the urge to close every loop for them. Let them wonder what you meant. Let them ask for the next piece. When you stop over-explaining yourself and start leaving room for them to step closer, the dynamic shifts. You become the mystery worth solving instead of the puzzle already solved. The silence between messages, the pause before the punchline, the question left hanging. These are the moments that keep someone coming back. Try this. Send a message that makes them want to ask you something back, not to confuse them, but to invite them into your world instead of handing it over completely. Photograph selection bias effect. Swipe through someone's photos and you're not actually looking at a person. You're looking at a highlight reel curated by them, their best friends, and whatever algorithm decides to surface first. Every single image has been chosen, sometimes obsessively, to present a version of themselves that feels both aspirational and believable at once. Your brain knows this is a performance, but it processes the pictures as if they were documentary evidence anyway. The photos you see first anchor you hardest. A genuinely kind person who photographs poorly gets swiped left. A charismatic face with dead eyes gets a match before breakfast. You're meeting a self-constructed image, and the more flattering it is, the bigger the chasm between expectation and the person who actually walks through the door. Then you meet face to face, and your brain does something brutal. It compares the living, breathing human to the curated version you've been staring at for weeks. If they look different, softer, older, smaller, disappointment arrives before they've spoken a word, not because they're disappointing, but because your expectations were trained on a lie. That gap colors everything that follows. You listen less generously. You notice flaws faster. You're subtly defensive without knowing why. The disappointment hardens into a frame you can't quite unframe, even if the person sitting across from you is genuinely wonderful. Photographs are arguments, not evidence. Meet early, meet in daylight. Let the real person be more interesting and stranger than the image, and notice what you actually feel when they're fully themselves, unfiltered. Cheerleader group photo effect. Scroll through someone's dating profile or Instagram, and you'll notice the pattern almost immediately. They're always front and center in group shots, radiant and laughing, somehow impossible to forget. Your brain is processing something real, but it's not what you think. Researchers call it the cheerleader effect. When you appear in a cluster of faces, you look more attractive and memorable than you actually are in isolation. It's not vanity or good lighting. It's neurology at work. Your brain integrates faces within their social context, and a face that stands out positively in a group registers as more confident, more valued, more genuinely present than that same face staring alone at a camera. It's visual proof of belonging. Now flip the lens. If someone only ever shows you solo shots or photos where they're half hidden or drowsy, they either don't understand this effect or they know it works against them. In dating psychology, the people who aren't afraid to appear in group context, who radiate comfort around others, who show themselves as someone people want to stand next to, they get remembered longer. Not because they're objectively more beautiful, but because your brain learned to pair their image with social proof and ease. You're not falling for them harder. You're filing them as someone who belongs, someone safe, someone worth keeping around. The sticky part, your own profile, tells a story the same way. If you want to be hard to forget, stop hiding in solo shots and selfies. Show yourself as someone who lights up around people. That visual evidence of ease and connection is sticky in ways isolation never will be. And it's the first impression your person never forgets. Pre-selection social proof. Walk into a room where someone is being touched by others, laughed at, sought after, and watch how fast the temperature shifts around them. That person becomes magnetic, not because they suddenly got hotter, but because you just got evidence that other people see value there. Your brain shortcuts the whole evaluation and borrows someone else's approval like currency. When you know a person is wanted elsewhere, scarcity kicks in. You stop asking, "Should I care?" and start asking, "Will I still care when someone else takes them?" The effect is ridiculous because it works on almost everyone, even the most self-aware among us. You have probably felt this yourself, that slight panic when you learn an ex is dating someone new, or that small spike of interest when you see someone surrounded by friends. None of that is rational. All of it is real. Here's the subtle part, though. Pre-selection is not about being fake or manufacturing a fake crowd around you. It's about being genuinely engaged with the people in your life, making time for friendships, having your own momentum and interests that matter. When someone sees you laughing with people who matter to you, focused on things you care about, they feel the absence of that attention, and suddenly they want it. The currency is real engagement, not theater. Build a life where you are clearly valued by others, and watch how the people you actually want start noticing you differently. Third-party validation framing. Your friend mentions that someone thinks you're interesting, and suddenly that person feels more interesting to you, not because they changed, but because someone else confirmed it first. That's third-party validation framing in action, and it rewires how people see you without you ever having to say a word. In dating, this happens everywhere. When someone hears you've been praised by mutual friends, sought after by others, or trusted by people they respect, your perceived value rises like a silent bid at an auction. It's not shallow. It's how human brains actually evaluate worth. We trust the crowd's judgment more than we trust our own instincts, especially when we're still uncertain about someone. The real skill here is that this framing doesn't require manufactured drama or name dropping. You're not building a fake admirers list or dropping breadcrumbs about your exes. Instead, you let your actual life become visible. You mention the colleague who values your opinion. You show up at group events where people naturally witness you being valued and listened to. You let the people who respect you simply exist in plain sight without ever stating it as a humble brag. The person dating you picks up these signals like a radio station. This person matters to people who matter. But here's where honesty becomes non-negotiable. Third-party validation only holds weight if it's real. Fabricate it, and the whole thing collapses into neediness. If you actually have people in your corner who respect your time, seek your counsel, and think you're worth knowing, let that live in the open, not as performance, as simple truth. That's what changes how someone looks at you. Status signaling without bragging. You're in a conversation with someone you're genuinely interested in when the inevitable question lands. What do you do? Where are you from? What's next for you? The answer determines whether they see you as confident or just another person trying too hard. Bragging feels like a sales pitch the moment you lean into it. Name the accomplishment, list the credential, and you've already lost the thread of real connection. But dodge the question entirely and you come across as evasive, like you're hiding something worth hiding. What actually works is something quieter, nearly invisible. You mention real things about your life, a project you're genuinely proud of, a skill you've built over time, somewhere you've traveled, but you bury the status signal inside a genuine story instead. Maybe you talk about the frustration of learning guitar rather than how many songs you can play. You describe a trip by what went weird, not the resort's star rating. You let someone infer your competence from the texture of the details, not from you naming it out loud. Here's the psychological hook. Humans are wired to trust what we discover ourselves far more than what we're told directly. Bragging triggers skepticism. Stories feel like you're just talking, thinking out loud, sharing something real. So when someone asks about your work, you don't say, "I run a successful business." You say, "I've been figuring out how to keep my team sane while scaling everything faster than I expected." And suddenly they're leaning in, asking follow-up questions, assembling the picture that you're capable without you ever having to claim it. Status without the sting. That quiet confidence is what makes someone think, "I want to know more about this person." Costly signaling authenticity test. Watch what someone does when it costs them something, time, comfort, money, or pride. A person can say almost anything in a text or on a good day, but the real signal lives in what they choose to sacrifice. If someone rearranges their whole evening to see you, drives across town in bad weather, or admits something vulnerable that makes them look worse, those actions have skin in the game. They are betting something real on you. Empty words are cheap. Inconvenience is honest. The brain knows the difference, even if you are trying not to notice it. Here is where it gets tricky. People who genuinely like you will often hide the signal. They will not announce it. Instead, you will see it in the small, costly choices they keep making. Showing up tired, being honest about insecurity, staying on the phone when they have work waiting. They are doing the math in their head and choosing you anyway. That is not performance. That is the opposite of performance. The real danger is falling for someone whose costly signals are all talk and no action, or worse, someone who performs big gestures but vanishes when real consistency is required. Real authenticity is not loud. It is repetitive, unglamorous, and voluntary. So when you are trying to figure out if someone is genuine, stop listening to what they promise and start noticing what they actually give up to show up for you. That is where the truth lives. That is also where you learn who you can trust with your time, your heart, and your vulnerable self. Scarcity without manufactured games. Watch someone's face when they sense a script, the 3-day silence, the sudden unavailability after nightly texts, the calculated pause. They feel the performance underneath before they even know what it is. Real scarcity is not a move you make. It is the shape of a life that actually matters. You have work that demands focus, friends who depend on you, projects you build, things you create and learn and think about that have nothing to do with them at all. When you show up, it is because you chose to, not because you ran out of options. That distinction lives in your body, and they sense it immediately. Someone genuinely occupied by things they care about moves differently. They text back slower because they were actually absorbed in something, unavailable sometimes because real life is genuinely happening. No resentment about it because they were not thinking about the other person while thinking about the other person. That paradox is what pulls attention. The person trying to be scarce is constantly aware of the scarcity game. They are performing it. The person living a full life forgets to check their phone. Which one feels more magnetic to be around? The answer is obvious. The second one does not need dating advice because they are too busy being someone worth remembering. If you are reading this, you already know what to do. Build something you actually care about. Stop performing unavailability. Let real life make you genuinely hard to reach sometimes. That is the only scarcity that does not smell like a trick. Scarcity of your attention. People get quieter when you stop texting back right away, and it's not because absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's only half the story. What actually happens is your unavailability becomes data. Every slow reply, every night you don't answer, every time you're clearly doing something else gets filed away as a clue about how much you value them. Your attention is the rarest thing you own, and someone who wants you will notice the exact moment you're careless with it. The cruel part is this works in reverse too. When you give someone your full presence, phone down, eye contact, laughing at their jokes like nothing else exists, they feel chosen, not in a desperate way, but in a way that makes them wonder what they did to get that treatment. They want to stay worthy of it. So here's where most people accidentally sabotage themselves. They think consistency means always being available. Actually, it means being deliberately unavailable in ways that prove you have a life, then being completely present when you show up. Show up tired after a long day, and they'll feel it. Disappear for 3 days because you're busy with actual things that matter, and they'll feel that too. The gap between your attention and your absence is where attraction lives. Not games, exactly, real scarcity. You can't be everywhere. When you act like you are, you become invisible. The people who stay in your orbit are the ones who've learned to treasure the moments you actually show up because they know you don't show up for everyone. Mystery quota maintenance. You know that moment when someone finally tells you everything, their childhood fears, their real salary, what they actually think of your friends, and suddenly the air feels lighter but also kind of deflated? That's the exact second attraction starts its slow fade. Not because honesty is bad, but because you just filled in all the blank spaces, and blank spaces are where imagination lives. The person you were building in your head had infinite potential. The person who actually exists has a mortgage and a weird laugh and three things they're weirdly defensive about: human, real, less magnetic. People stay curious about mystery the way they stay hungry for dessert. The not knowing is the whole draw. This isn't about game playing or being fake. It's about the fact that you don't need to volunteer every detail the moment you're asked. You don't owe anyone your complete interior architecture on date 3. You can enjoy something without immediately explaining why. You can have a hobby that isn't about impressing them. You can have an entire part of your life they haven't seen yet and won't see for months. That boundary isn't cold, it's magnetic. The people who feel most compelled to stay around are the ones who sense there's more to discover, that they haven't solved you yet. Not because you're withholding or evasive, but because you have an actual inner life that doesn't require an audience to feel real. That texture, that separateness, that "I wonder what else is going on in there," that's what keeps someone thinking about you at 2 a.m. Maintain that quota. Let them wonder. Strategic unavailability honesty. Think about the last time someone told you they were busy and you actually believe them, not because they were vague or playing games, but because they said it straight. "I'm slammed this week," not blowing you off, real schedule thing. Something in that honesty makes you trust them more, not less. That's the paradox nobody talks about. Radical transparency about your limits actually makes you more desirable, not less attractive. Most people assume you need to hide unavailability, pretend you're free even when you're not, or disappear mysteriously and let someone wonder. But the psychology works the opposite way. When you name your constraints without defensiveness, something shifts. You stop looking desperate or playing games. You look like someone with a life, someone with boundaries, someone who won't abandon their own world to chase validation. The trick is the honesty part, not "I'm so busy" as a power move that reads as ego, not radio silence followed by a text 3 days later. Real honesty sounds like, "I'm genuinely swamped until Thursday, but I want to see you then," or "This month is rough. I don't want to half-ass time with you." You're not selling your unavailability. You're showing you respect both of you enough to tell the truth. People feel that difference instantly. It's the difference between someone who's protecting themselves and someone who's respecting them. And the irony is sharp. The more honest you are about when you can't show up, the more they believe you when you do. Scarcity that's real and admitted beats manufactured mystery every single time. Intermittent reinforcement trap. You text them at 9 p.m. They reply at 11. You text again the next day and get silence until evening. Sometimes they're warm. Sometimes they're distant. Sometimes they disappear for 2 days, then suddenly send 3 messages in a row. You keep checking your phone. Your stomach tightens a little each time you see their name light up. You've never felt more hooked. That's not love chemistry. That's a slot machine. Intermittent reinforcement is when a reward comes unpredictably. and it's literally the most addictive pattern a brain can learn. Casinos use it. Abusers use it. Sometimes people use it by accident, but the result is the same. You start chasing the high of their attention more intensely than you would if they were simply kind and consistent. The trap wraps around you quietly. Scarcity and unpredictability begin to feel like depth. A person who's always there feels boring by comparison, even if they're actually healthier. Your nervous system hasn't learned to value steady warmth the way it values the dopamine spike of finally getting a response after hours of doubt. The way out isn't willpower or better boundaries. It's recognizing the pattern for what it is. If you're tracking someone's response times like they're a rare event, if relief floods you when they finally text back, if you find consistent partners feel less exciting, or you're not in love, you're in a psychological loop that's been trained into your nervous system. The person who shows up reliably isn't the boring one. The intermittent one is the training wheel you need to recognize and outgrow before it shapes how you love. Variable reward addiction loop. You text them and get a response in 2 minutes. You feel good, you text again, and this time they reply in 3 hours. That hurt a little more because you expected the 2-minute answer. Next time, you wait before checking your phone, but when you finally do, they've sent something kind and unexpected. Dopamine floods. Your brain just learned a lesson. Ignore them long enough, and the reward might be better. This is not a flaw in you. This is a slot machine sitting in your pocket, and their inconsistency is the lever. Casinos know that predictable payouts are boring. A guaranteed reward every time teaches you nothing. It's just routine. But a reward that comes sometimes in random intervals with occasional jackpots, that rewires your brain to keep pulling. Dating works the same way. The person who responds immediately is comfortable. The person who alternates between ice and warmth is addictive. 3 unanswered messages followed by a flood of affection doesn't feel like neglect plus kindness. It feels like a win you had to earn. The trap is that you start chasing the variable, not the person. You interpret silence as a sign you're not trying hard enough. You change yourself to squeeze out more unpredictable moments, more tiny victories. Before long, you're optimizing for chaos instead of connection. Notice when someone's inconsistency excites you more than their consistency comforts you. That's the machine working. A person worth keeping doesn't make you feel like you're gambling. They make you feel like you're safe. Choice, overload, swipe, fatigue. 20 minutes in and the faces start to blur together. Someone was probably perfect 3 swipes back, but they're already gone, so you keep scrolling, wondering if the next profile holds something better. Your brain treats each face like a catalog item, and the moment you swipe past, they vanish from existence, which makes the person in front of you feel urgently important until suddenly they don't. Welcome to swipe fatigue, where abundance has become its own kind of scarcity. The real damage isn't just exhaustion, it's that your standards keep climbing because you're always negotiating with a phantom. The better match you might find in 2 more swipes. This rewires how you connect. Real chemistry requires you to stay with a choice, to build something over friction and time and small surprises. But app culture trains you to optimize, compare, discard. Your tired brain makes worse decisions the longer you swipe, so you either quit altogether or keep going mechanically, hoping something sticks by sheer volume. The psychological trap is that choice paralysis masquerades as freedom. When fatigue sets in deep, you stop noticing actual people and start noticing pictures. The antidote isn't willpower or better judgment. It's friction. Close the app after 10 minutes. Match with fewer people and actually message them. Let yourself feel bored with the endless scroll because that boredom is your real preferences trying to surface underneath. The person worth remembering isn't the one with the perfect angle or the cleverest bio. It's the one you chose to stay curious about when you had 100 others waiting to be swiped away. Paradox of choice on apps. Swipe for 30 seconds and you have already seen more potential partners than your grandparents met in a lifetime. So why does having infinite options feel worse than having none? The trap is this. Abundance doesn't liberate you, it paralyzes you. Each profile is another door that might lead somewhere better, so you keep swiping, telling yourself the perfect match is one more swipe away. Meanwhile, the person who could have been great gets unmade in your head before you even text them because doubt whispers, "There's another one coming." Research shows that when people face too many options, they regret their choice more often and feel less satisfied with who they picked. Not because the person is worse, but because the unchosen haunts them. Your brain counts all the roads not taken. On apps, this gets turbocharged because the unchosen are right there, still scrolling, still existing in a visual queue waiting for you. So you match with someone genuinely interesting, but before the conversation even lands, you're already wondering if the next person might have better conversation skills, better photos, better potential. It's not that you're shallow, it's that the medium itself trains you to constantly compare and scout for upgrades. The real move? Set a boundary that feels almost artificial at first. Decide how long you'll swipe on a given day, then stop and text back the people who showed up. Give one connection actual attention before scanning for alternatives. The best match isn't the one with the most options left open. It's the one you chose to stop choosing for. Decoy option in choice sets. You walk into a coffee shop and see 3 drink sizes: small, medium, large. The small costs $3, the large costs $5. The medium, almost the same price as the large, suddenly makes the large look like a steal. That middle option barely existed. Its real job was to make you want something bigger. Now slide that into dating. Someone mentions an ex, not to make you jealous, but their presence in the story, how successful they were, how difficult the breakup shifts, how you measure the current relationship. You're not evaluating what's in front of you on its own merits anymore. You're comparing it against an invisible benchmark that wasn't supposed to be there. Decoy options are everywhere in attraction and choice. A dating profile next to a less polished one makes the first look magnetic. A person who has other romantic options nearby, even if those options are struggling, makes them feel more valuable without doing anything different. Your brain doesn't weigh things in absolute terms. It weighs them against whatever is closest. You become more attracted to someone when you believe others find them attractive too, or when there's a lesser alternative that makes them shine by contrast. The trap is that this isn't rational comparison. It's your nervous system getting hijacked by proximity and framing. If you're choosing a partner, strip away the decoys, the ex, the other suitors, the story about how hard they are to get. See what's actually there. Then ask whether you'd want it if nobody else was watching. Authoritative mating similarity poll. At dinner, you notice your partner's laugh sounds like yours. Their values landed somewhere near yours before you even met. You didn't engineer this. You just kept gravitating toward people who already resembled you in the ways that mattered. That pull is authoritative mating, and it runs beneath every swipe, every first conversation, every decision to call someone back. Humans pair up with people who match them on intelligence, education, income, values, even height and attractiveness, more than random chance would predict. It's a sorting mechanism so quiet you barely feel it working. The stickiness comes from familiarity and reduced friction. When someone's baseline worldview aligns with yours, you fight less about the big stuff, less energy spent bridging gaps, more energy available for building something real. But here's what most people miss. Authoritative mating also locks you in. If you partner with someone exactly like you get someone who reinforces your blind spots rather than challenges them. You both see the world the same way, which feels easy and safe until it suddenly feels limiting. The couple who shared every interest sometimes wakes up realizing they never grew. The couple who looked identical on paper sometimes discovers they wanted different things all along. So instead of searching for your mirror, consider looking for someone who matches you in values and attachment style, but differs in perspective, curiosity, or lived experience. That friction isn't friction, it's the engine. The similarity that actually sticks longest isn't the kind you were born with. It's the kind you build together, edge by edge, choice by choice. Complementarity in dominance dimension. Watch how power moves in a room with two people who actually fit. One leans in, the other leans back. One decides the restaurant, the other decides what happens after. Neither fights for control, they just occupy different lanes. That rhythm, that invisible choreography where neither person is scrambling for the same seat, happens when complementarity flows in the dominance dimension, and it's one of the quietest predictors of whether people stay together. It's not that one person is dominant and the other submissive in some theatrical sense. It's that you each know where your influence lands without collision. Maybe you steer decisions about money and he steers decisions about how you spend free time. Maybe she's the social architect and you're the planner. Maybe you lead in conflict and he leads in play. The spark isn't about equality in every single thing. It's about asymmetry that doesn't breed resentment or scorekeeping. Here's where most people slip up. Trying to be equally dominant in every domain creates friction where there should be flow. You both want to lead the conversation. You both want to choose the movie. You both want to decide the next step. That's when everything goes tense and small and exhausting. The couples who last aren't keeping a ledger of who decided what. They're the ones who naturally gravitated into different power zones and felt relief, not loss, in that split. So before you write someone off for not being assertive enough or being too controlling, ask yourself, are you fighting over the same territory? Or are you each quietly sovereign in different rooms? Romeo and Juliet effect. Your parents told you not to see them, and that midnight text hit different than any you'd received before. Suddenly, the relationship wasn't just about attraction. It was about defiance, about proving something, about being special enough to break rules for. That's the Romeo and Juliet effect, and it's pure neuroscience disguised as romance. When external pressure intensifies a connection, your brain doesn't just fall harder for the person, it falls harder for the story. Danger, secrecy, forbidden fruit. These trigger dopamine spikes that make you feel alive in a way ordinary affection never does. You're not attracted anymore. You're addicted to the narrative of it, to the adrenaline, to playing hero in your own movie. The trap is that this intensity feels like evidence of true love. It isn't. It's evidence that obstacles exist and your nervous system responds to threat. Real couples who face genuine external pressure sometimes confuse the adrenaline for depth, assuming that because the relationship is hard to maintain, it must be worth it. But difficulty proves nothing. A plant growing in poor soil isn't more valuable than a healthy plant. It's just stressed. The Romeo and Juliet effect crumbles the moment pressure releases. Parents relent. Distance closes. The forbidden becomes ordinary. And suddenly, you're looking at someone you thought was irreplaceable, realizing you were in love with the situation, not them. The warning isn't subtle. If you're with someone specifically because it's complicated, sit with that honestly and ask yourself what happens when it isn't. Real connection survives ease, thrives in it even. The best relationships aren't secret wars fought in the dark. They're the ones that feel like coming home, the ones that don't need obstacles to feel worth fighting for. Boundary as a traction signal. Watch what happens when someone says no to you. Really no, not the kind wrapped in apology or explanation. There's something magnetic about it. You notice them more. You want to know why. You feel the weight of your own desire pressing against their actual limit. And suddenly, they're not just another option. They're real, separate, and worth something. That's the secret most people get backward. We think attraction builds through endless availability, texting back fast, dropping everything, proving we're interested. But what actually triggers desire is the opposite. The person who has their own thing, who doesn't need to perform for you, who can say no without guilt or negotiation. When someone maintains a boundary with you, they're not being difficult. They're showing you they have a center of gravity that doesn't orbit you. They have standards, a life, a self that exists independent of your attention. And your brain reads that as high status. High status means something to protect, something to work for, something real. The trap is trying to manufacture this, being artificially cold or distant as a tactic. People smell that immediately. It reads as game, not self-respect. Real boundaries come from actually having a boundary, not answering texts at midnight because you sleep at midnight, not canceling plans with friends because someone new texted, not shrinking yourself smaller to fit someone else's shape. If you want to be harder to forget, become a little harder to reach, not impossible. Just honest about your own life and your own rhythm. That's the move that makes someone look up from their phone and actually wonder who you are. Non-reactivity to tests. Someone cancels plans last minute. Someone goes quiet for hours. Someone flirts with someone else in front of you. Your chest tightens. Your mind floods with stories. They don't respect you. They're losing interest. You're being replaced. And then you react. You text too much. You play games back. You get cold. You demand reassurance. Sound familiar? That's the test you just failed, except neither of you knew it was happening. In the early months of dating, people unconsciously test whether you'll stay steady when they pull away or create friction. They're not always doing it on purpose. Anxiety makes us test people we like, but the ones who pass aren't the ones who react the hardest. They're the ones who don't react at all, not in a cold way, in a grounded way. Someone goes quiet, you don't flood their phone, you stay warm but unruffled. Someone cancels, you shrug, reschedule calmly, and keep living. Someone acts distant, you don't chase or punish, you simply stay your own person. Here's what happens. That non-reactivity signals something deeper than words ever could. It says you have options, that you're not desperate, that you trust the connection enough not to panic. It's the opposite of trying too hard. And weirdly, it's magnetic. People want to be around someone who stays steady when the ground shifts. So the next time you feel that sting of a test, and you will recognize it now, try this. Pause before you respond. Let them see you unfazed, not unkind, just unmoved by the bait. That's what people actually fall for. Frame control without manipulation. There's a moment in every conversation where someone decides what the interaction is really about, and it's almost never announced. You're on a date, and they say, "I'm just looking for something casual right now," and suddenly the entire frame shifts. You weren't selecting a partner, you were auditioning for a role. The frame was already set before you opened your mouth. Frame control is simply deciding what conversation you're in before the other person does, and the trick is that it doesn't require any dishonesty. It requires clarity. When you know what you want, whether that's emotional depth, physical chemistry, shared values, or low pressure, you lead with that lens, not as a demand, as the lens through which you see everything. If someone asks why you're being picky, you don't apologize, you reframe, I'm not being picky, I'm being honest about what works for me. That small shift moves you from defensive to grounded. Manipulation happens when you hide your actual frame and pretend to want what they want, only to pull the rug later. Control without manipulation is the opposite. You're transparent about the game you're playing, and you let them decide if they want in. People actually respect that more than you'd expect. They may not like your frame, they may walk away, but they trust someone who knows exactly what they want far more than someone who bends to every suggestion and has no spine. The people worth keeping around are the ones who either share your frame or are genuinely curious about it. Everyone else is just noise. Attachment style pattern matching. You've probably noticed you keep dating the same person over and over. Different faces, same emotional flavor. That's not coincidence. That's your nervous system looking for something familiar, even if familiar hurt. Your attachment style is like a template you learned as a kid, and now you're unconsciously scanning for people who fit it. If you grew up with someone who was warm but unpredictable, you're magnetized to the exciting, flaky person. If you had a withdrawn parent, you chase the emotionally distant one, telling yourself this time you'll finally crack the code. The trick is that your brain reads these patterns as home. So the chemistry feels real. That's why it's so hard to leave. You feel like you're in love when you're actually just in recognition. The person doesn't have to be good for you, they just have to match the wound. Here's what keeps you stuck in the loop. You won't break the cycle until you actually see what you're reaching for. Not the version you tell yourself at dinner, but the one your attachment system learned before language even existed. Start asking yourself who you consistently choose and what they do or don't do that reminds you of someone earlier. The attachment pattern won't dissolve overnight, but the moment you see it running in real time, the moment you catch yourself reaching for the familiar sting, you gain a choice you never had before. That small awareness is often the edge between repeating the same story and finally writing a different one. Anxious, avoidant, trap dynamic. Watch this play out. One person texts fast, plans ahead, leans in hard. The other feels smothered and pulls back, goes quiet, takes longer to respond. The more the first person reaches, the more the second retreats. Not a rhythm, a doom loop. Both feel completely justified. The anxious one thinks, they don't care, I need to try harder. The avoidant one thinks, they're too much, I need distance. Neither is wrong about their own experience, but they're triggering exactly the behavior in the other that they're most terrified of. The anxious person fears abandonment and creates the conditions for it. The avoidant person fears suffocation and runs straight into someone who will chase them. Outside the relationship, these are often strength patterns. Anxious people are loyal, attentive, devoted. Avoidant people are independent, self-sufficient, hard to rattle, but together they become mirrors of each other's deepest pain. Breaking it requires someone to go first, usually the anxious partner, by pulling back slightly and building their own nervous system stability, not as punishment, but as actual survival. The moment that person stops overfunctioning, the avoidant partner often realizes the space they wanted so badly now feels empty. What sounded like distance was actually a hunger for something else. Real change only happens when both see the pattern itself, not the person, and realize they've been dancing the same painful waltz on repeat. Secure-based broadcasting. Watch what happens when someone feels truly steady in their own life. They don't perform, they don't reach, they show up and the room settles around them. Not because they're loud or impressive, but because they're grounded. That calmness is a signal, and it's magnetic. Your nervous system becomes a tuning fork for theirs. When you're anxious, they feel the noise. When you're solid, they feel the safety. Psychologists call this secure-based broadcasting, and it's the quiet work of being someone others want to return to. It's not about being perfect or pretending you have your life figured out. It's about being anchored enough that your date doesn't have to guess whether you're okay. You don't need reassurance from them to feel okay with yourself. That absence of desperate energy is louder than any compliment. People fall for steadiness because it's rare. Most of us are half watching for rejection, fishing for validation, monitoring their expressions to see if we're enough. That twitchy energy exhausts people. But when you show up knowing your own ground, your values, your boundaries, what you actually want, suddenly you're interesting to be around because you're not borrowing your sense of self from them. The real work isn't a dating trick. It's knowing what you stand for, keeping your other relationships close, having interests that feed you, sitting with discomfort without needing someone else to fix it. That's what broadcasts as attractive. Not confidence, exactly. Just the quiet relief of someone who doesn't need you to complete them, which somehow makes them the only person you want to stay with. Protest behavior recognition. You're texting someone you care about and they take longer than usual to reply. When they finally do, the message is shorter, fewer emojis, no haha or inside jokes. Your stomach tightens. Something feels off. What you're actually witnessing is protest behavior, and it almost never announces itself loud. It's the soft, indirect way people show hurt or frustration without saying the words out loud, choosing instead to leak their pain through 1,000 small withdrawals. In dating, this shows up constantly. The person who suddenly becomes busy, the one who stops initiating plans, the text that feels clipped, the Netflix date that gets canceled last minute. None of it is accident. Each shift is a small message wrapped in plausible deniability. They can always claim they were genuinely tired or work got crazy. But the pattern tells the real story, and here's what makes it dangerous. Protest behavior often goes unnoticed until enough of it has piled up that resentment has already hardened into something harder to reach. By the time you recognize it, they have already checked out a little, maybe more. The move that actually works is naming it gently, early, and without accusation. Not, "You're being cold to me, but I noticed things feel different lately. What's going on?" This matters because people often don't realize they're protesting. They just know something feels wrong, and their behavior shifts before their words catch up. When you spot the protest and ask about it directly, you give them permission to tell you what actually hurts instead of letting silence do the damage. Deactivating strategy awareness. You're 3 months into something good, and suddenly you catch yourself doing the thing you swore you wouldn't. Spacing out texts, staying late at work, keeping your phone face down on the table. You're dimming yourself on purpose. The weird part is, you know you're doing it. You can feel the calculation happening, but you keep doing it anyway. That's deactivating strategy awareness, and it's the moment you become both the chess player and the piece. Attachment researchers call this a deactivating strategy. You're consciously withdrawing to test if the other person will chase you, or to protect yourself before they leave, or to maintain the upper hand by seeming less invested. But here's the trap that gets people stuck. Awareness doesn't stop the behavior. You see the strategy firing. you understand why, and you perform it anyway, like you're watching yourself from the audience while a different version of you is on stage. The trap deepens because partial awareness feels like control. You think, I know I'm doing this, so I can stop anytime. But that's the lie. Knowing doesn't equal stopping. In fact, it often makes it worse because now you're managing the strategy and managing the guilt about managing it. You're exhausted before the date even starts. The move. If you catch yourself mid-strategy, don't try to override it through willpower. Pause and ask what you're actually protecting against right now. Is it abandonment, rejection, loss of status? Name the real fear underneath the chess move. That honesty often dissolves the need to perform. The game stops being fun once you admit you're playing it. Rejection, sensitivity, self-fulfilling loop. You walk into a date already braced for the letdown. They're 2 minutes late and you feel it. Proof that you're not worth their time. They laugh at someone else's joke and you go quiet. By the end of the night, they don't text back and you nod to yourself like you always knew. What you don't see is how your armor pushed them away. People with high rejection sensitivity often broadcast a kind of preemptive coldness, a guard so high that connection becomes almost impossible. You're protecting yourself from the wound you expect, but the strategy itself creates it. The rejection you feared becomes real, not because you're unlovable, but because you stopped letting anyone close enough to try. Here's the trap. Once it happens, once or twice, the loop tightens. You expect rejection, you act like you expect it. They feel your distance and pull back, and suddenly you have fresh proof that the world is exactly as cruel as you suspected. Your nervous system goes into permanent red alert on dates. You misread neutral moments as rejection. A pause in conversation becomes abandonment. A difference of opinion becomes a deal breaker. Each time you're wrong, but it feels right because your body has already decided the story before any words landed. The way out is slower than you'd like. Noticing when you're armor-plated, catching the assumption before it becomes a prophecy, and risking one small moment of genuine openness with someone patient enough to meet you there. Not every person will be worth that risk, but at least you'll finally find out who might be. Sternberg triangular love components. You know that feeling when someone makes your heart race, but you're not sure if you'd actually build a life with them? Or when you're comfortable with someone, genuinely care, but the spark vanished 3 years ago? Those aren't failures. They're different shapes of love, and Sternberg's triangle explains why. The 3 corners are intimacy, passion, and commitment. Intimacy is the closeness, the knowing each other deeply, the trust that lets you say things you'd never say to anyone else. Passion is the heat, the attraction, the wanting them physically and emotionally right now. Commitment is the deliberate choice to keep choosing them, the I'm in this that survives boring Tuesdays and real disagreements. Most people chase passion alone and then feel blindsided when it cools, because they built on one corner only. Some settle into companionate love, heavy on intimacy and commitment, but light on spark, and wonder why they feel quietly numb. The secret is recognizing which corner is missing and whether you actually need it, or you've been sold a movie version of love that doesn't apply to your life. You might have genuine, sustaining intimacy with someone and almost no passion, and that can be enough if you stop comparing it to what you thought you should feel. The people who stay unforgettable aren't the ones who light you on fire once. They're the ones you choose, who know you deeply, and who you actually build something real with. Sometimes all 3 corners show up together. Sometimes 2 is genuine enough. But knowing the difference keeps you from staying in the wrong shape of love or leaving the right one because it didn't look like a movie. Positive illusions benefit stability. Watch couples who've stayed together for years, still laughing in the kitchen, still choosing each other, and notice what they actually see when they look across the table. That habit your partner has that makes everyone else wince, they probably don't notice it the same way you do, and you're doing things they've quietly decided aren't worth their mental energy. This isn't delusion, it's selective attention, and it might be the real architecture holding your relationship upright. Researchers found that couples maintaining what they call positive illusions, seeing your person slightly better than strict reality warrants, report higher satisfaction and stay together longer. You soften the memory of their criticism. You remember their effort as grander than it was. Small moments of them being less than simply evaporate from your highlight reel. On the surface, this sounds backwards, like you're building on fiction, but the data keeps saying the same thing. Relationships that run on brutal honesty break. Relationships that run on mercy survive. The everyday maintenance of love involves choosing a generous version of focus. You don't catalog every flaw. You remember the good version of who they tried to be, even when they fell short. This isn't about ignoring red flags or staying in something genuinely broken. It's about understanding that the small mercies you offer in silence do more work than your rational mind gives them credit for. The next time you catch yourself being kind to your memory of them, glossing over something annoying, choosing not to bring it up, don't correct it, that generosity is your relationship's quiet engine. Idealization, decay timeline. 3 months in, you notice they chew too loud. 6 months, and their jokes land differently, flatter somehow. A year later, you're wondering if you ever really knew them at all. What you're watching isn't them changing, it's your brain's romanticization effect wearing off like a filter someone finally wiped clean. The timeline is remarkably consistent. The first glow peaks around weeks 4 to 8, then begins a slow, predictable fade. Neuroscience calls this the shift from limerence to attachment, but what matters is that you can feel it happening if you're honest. Your partner didn't suddenly become ordinary. Your nervous system simply stopped flooding your perception with dopamine and norepinephrine. You started seeing actual flaws, the impatience you coded as directness, the insecurity you mistook for confidence, the control you romanticized as care. Most people panic here, blaming the other person or themselves, thinking they chose wrong or fell out of love. But this decay isn't failure. It's the necessary clearing that lets real love begin. Real love, durable, grounded love, happens after idealization fades, not before. The couples who last aren't the ones who never saw flaws. They're the ones who saw them and stayed anyway, who rebuilt attraction on something truer than neurochemistry. If you're 6 months in and noticing the shine wearing off, resist the urge to flee towards someone new. That person will hand you the same intoxicating high for the same 3-month window before their flaws emerge too. What's actually worth building only becomes visible once the haze clears and you can finally see who's really there. Rose-colored retrospection. Break up with someone and suddenly your brain becomes a highlight reel editor. The laugh at that cafe, the way they looked at you in the car, the midnight text, the fights, the silences, the small cruelties all go softer, hazier, almost forgettable. This isn't nostalgia. Your memory is actively rewriting the past to match the pain you feel now. Your ex is probably doing the same thing, remembering you as better, kinder, more present than you actually were. You're both living in parallel versions of a relationship that never existed quite like that. It happens because your brain hates ambiguity more than it hates being wrong. A messy, complicated person who hurt you is harder to carry than a beautiful ghost you almost had, so the story gets upgraded. When you're dating someone new, the mechanism flips. Early on, dopamine and novelty flood your system so completely that small annoyances barely register, or they feel charming, quirky, endearing. Then, 6 months in, that spontaneous quality starts looking reckless. The confident energy reads as selfish, but you've already poured the rosy filter so thick that reality takes months to break through. The trap is that you'll make major decisions, reaching out, committing, pushing away someone real, based on a version of events your own mind manufactured. Your memory is not a recording device. It's a storyteller with an agenda, and that agenda is comfort, not truth. Before you text an ex or declare someone the one, pause and ask what you're actually remembering versus what you're manufacturing. The gap between those two things is where most people get stuck. Capitalization on good news. A text lands, they got the job, nailed the presentation, their sister's wedding was beautiful, and they were in the photos. Most people respond with a thumbs up emoji or a quick nice and move on. But neuroscience calls this moment a trap door into emotional intimacy, and almost nobody walks through it right. When someone shares good news with you, you're witnessing them at genuine vulnerability, when their defenses drop and their brain is primed to bond. How you respond in those 60 seconds matters more than 1,000 reassurances ever will. The people you fall hardest for are often the ones who didn't just tolerate your wins, they amplified them. They asked follow-up questions. They remembered details. They felt genuinely happy, not threatened or small. Here's what most people get backwards. You don't capitalize on good news by making it about yourself or by suddenly pivoting into deeper territory. You do it by staying curious. Ask what it felt like in their body, what happens next, what they're scared might go wrong. Let them talk more, because real celebration is rarer than most things in dating, rarer than vulnerability even, because it requires you to hold space for someone else's light without dimming your own or competing for the spotlight. When someone knows you'll meet their joy without jealousy, without minimizing it, that's when they start believing you're safe, that you actually see them, that their moments matter to you, not because you want something later, but because they matter to them. That's the person people come back to again and again. Active, constructive responding. Your person tells you they got the job. Most of us fall into one of three traps. You say, "That's great," and change the subject, passive. You say, "Congrats, but make sure you don't burn out," passive destructive. Or you list reasons to worry about the new commute, active destructive. None of these land, but there's a fourth move, and it's the one that actually cements the bond. You lean in, you ask them how they feel. You say, "Tell me everything. When do you start? What will you be doing?" You celebrate their win like it's yours, not because you're faking it, but because you're genuinely curious about them in the moment. That's active, constructive responding, and it sounds small until you realize most people have never experienced it. We're too tired, too distracted, too busy waiting for our turn to talk. When someone responds to your news with real attention and real questions, something shifts. They're not just listening, they're choosing you in that moment. They're saying your joy matters enough to pause everything else. In relationships, this is the difference between someone who tolerates you and someone who makes you feel alive. The trick is consistency. It has to become reflex, not performance. When your person shares something, your job isn't to fix it or minimize it or compete with it. Your job is to turn toward them like they're the most interesting thing that happened today. Because if you don't do that now, when the relationship gets hard, they'll already know you're not the person they can turn to. Active constructive responding isn't a technique, it's proof. Bid for connection turning. Your partner makes a small joke during dinner. You're scrolling your phone, they laugh a little, wait a beat, then go quiet. That moment, when they offered you something and you didn't reach back, is called a bid for connection, and how you respond shapes whether you stay close or drift. Psychologist John Gottman spent decades watching couples and found that people who respond to these tiny bids, the "did you see that?" or the random thought shared mid-task, are the ones who build real intimacy. It sounds simple because it is. Your person isn't always asking for a big conversation. They're testing the water, offering you a small thread. When you turn toward it instead of away, something shifts in their nervous system. They feel seen, felt, chosen. Over time, those small turns compound into trust. The flip side hits harder, consistent turning away, the scrolling, the half attention, the while thinking of something else, trains your partner to bid less. Eventually, they stop altogether, not because the love died suddenly, but because it got tired of not being met. Many people don't even know they're turning away. It feels natural to be on your phone. It feels reasonable to be distracted, but your partner feels the difference every time in their body. Next time someone offers you a small bid, try this. Actually stop what you're doing for 10 seconds. Make eye contact. Respond to the real thing they're offering, not just the words. That moment of turning toward costs almost nothing and buys almost everything in a relationship. Watch what happens when you do. Emotional bank account deposits. Think about the last time someone remembered a detail you'd mentioned weeks ago. Your coffee order, the name of your struggling friend, that small victory you'd thrown out there in passing. That moment hit different, didn't it? That's a deposit into what researchers call your emotional bank account, and it's the actual currency of lasting attraction. Every small act of attunement, noticing, remembering, showing up without being asked, is money in the vault. A text saying, "How'd that meeting go?" after you'd mentioned it. Asking about their sibling by name, remembering they're nervous about something and checking in. These aren't grand gestures. They're proof you're actually paying attention to the person, not just the idea of them. Here's what most people miss. You can't withdraw trust and forgiveness when you haven't made deposits. You can't argue passionately, disappear for weeks, or cancel plans last minute and then expect someone to still feel safe with you. The account runs dry fast. But when you've been consistent with small deposits, reliable, attentive, genuinely curious, you build resilience into the relationship. You get grace when you mess up because there's a buffer. You get the benefit of the doubt because they already know you care. Most people bet everything on grand gestures and miss the math entirely. A single remembered detail is worth more than a surprise dinner if nothing else sticks in your mind about them. Start noticing what your person cares about. Write it down if you have to, then mention it back later like it never left your mind. That's not manipulation, that's love keeping score the right way, and it's what makes someone choose to stay. Repair attempt receptivity. You've just had a fight, real tension. Then your partner says something. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's a gentle touch on your arm. Maybe it's just, "I hate fighting with you." In that micro moment, you have a choice. You can let it land or you can block it. Most people block it without even knowing. That blocking is the real killer, not the fight itself. John Gottman, who studied thousands of couples, found that the couples who stayed together were not the ones who argued less. They were the ones who could actually receive a repair attempt when their partner made one. A repair attempt is any bid to soften the moment, to rebuild connection during rupture. It can be clumsy, it can be imperfect, but if you can't let it in, your partner eventually stops trying. They get tired, they stop reaching, and then you have a relationship where no one is reaching anymore, just two people moving in separate orbits. The trap is that when you're hurt or defensive, your brain gets very good at detecting intention, and it assumes the worst. A joke feels sarcastic. A touch feels patronizing. You're not wrong to be cautious. You're just catastrophizing about motive. Here is the move. When someone tries to repair, your only job is to notice it happened. Not to forgive yet, not to forget the fight, but to acknowledge that they tried. That small allowance, that willingness to see the reach is what keeps the door open. Without it, no relationship survives long enough to learn how to truly argue. Negativity bias 5-to-1 ratio. Your partner says something kind during dinner. You feel a flutter. Then they mention they were annoyed about something you did last week, and suddenly that flutter disappears, replaced by a knot in your stomach that will live there for hours. Welcome to the math of human emotion. It takes 5 good moments to undo the weight of one bad one. This is not pessimism or paranoia. It is how your nervous system is wired. Your ancestors had to notice threats faster than they noticed food, or they did not survive long enough to have descendants like you. So your brain learned to amplify the negative, to loop it, to make sure you never forget. In dating, this becomes a quiet saboteur. A thoughtful text is nice. A forgotten text is a story about why they do not care. A great night together is lovely. One strange look across the table becomes proof that something is wrong. You are not broken for noticing the negative weight more heavily. You are human. But knowing this ratio changes how you move through doubt. When your mind pulls you toward that 5-to-1 narrative, when you feel the story building, try asking, what evidence am I leaving on the floor? What 5 kind things happen that my brain is not counting? This is not toxic positivity. It is math. And when you start doing the math consciously instead of letting your nervous system do it for you, a relationship can finally breathe. Start small. One night this week, write down 3 moments that felt good before your brain spins the single moment that felt off. Gottman 4 Horseman Detection. There's a moment in most relationships where you stop noticing the small stuff, the eye roll during a story, the clipped fine when asked what's wrong, the way your partner talks about you to their friends. Psychologist John Gottman spent decades watching couples and found that 4 specific communication patterns predict breakup with startling accuracy. Contempt is the first, a tone that says you're beneath them, usually wrapped in sarcasm or disgust. Criticism follows, not feedback, but character assassination. You're always selfish. Then comes defensiveness, where everything becomes an accusation back at the other person instead of an apology. The last horseman is stonewalling, emotional shutdown, the cold shoulder, checking out entirely. What makes this brutal is that by the time you see all 4, the relationship is usually already dying. But here's what saves you. You can catch them early. Pay attention to your own voice during disagreements. Does it harden? Do you feel that flicker of contempt creeping in? Notice when your partner stops trying to explain themselves and just closes down. These aren't relationship mistakes. They're signals that something deeper has broken. The real move is recognizing them in yourself first. If you hear contempt in your own words, pause. If you feel the wall going up inside you, name it. Couples who interrupt these patterns before they calcify, who notice contempt as a red flag instead of accepting it as normal, actually change course. You can't unsee these horsemen once you know what they look like. But that visibility is exactly what gives you a chance to choose differently. Stonewalling physiological flooding, your chest goes tight, your partner says something that lands wrong, and suddenly your body is no longer listening. It's defending. Heart rate climbs, blood floods away from your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part, and into your limbic system, the survival part. This is physiological flooding, and it happens faster than thought. What you do next matters more than you realize. Most people stonewall at this exact moment. They shut down, go silent, leave the room, refuse to engage. It feels like protection. It is the opposite. Stonewalling tells your partner that you cannot be reached, that the conversation is hopeless, that they are alone with their feelings. Even if you come back later and apologize, the nervous system has learned that intensity equals abandonment. Over time, your partner stops trying. They assume you do not care or cannot handle them, when the truth is neurobiological. Your body hijacked your choice. The fix is not to push through the feeling or white-knuckle your way to composure. Instead, name it. Tell your partner, I am flooded right now. I need to step away for 20 minutes so I can actually hear you. That simple sentence does three things at once. It acknowledges the real thing happening in your body. It promises you will return, not abandon. And it buys your nervous system time to resettle. When you come back, you can actually think. You can actually receive what they are saying. That is how trust survives the hard conversations, not by never getting heated, but by refusing to disappear when things get real. Demand, withdraw, conflict, spiral. You push closer, they step back. You push harder, they disappear into their phone. Sound familiar? This is the demand-withdraw dance, and it might be the most common relationship trap nobody names. One person, often the one who feels unseen, keeps asking for more. More attention, more reassurance, more connection. The other person, overwhelmed or defensive, retreats. And here's where it gets sticky. The retreater thinks they're protecting themselves. The demander thinks they're fighting for the relationship. Both are half right, which makes them both feel justified. What makes this spiral so vicious is that it feeds itself. When someone withdraws, the demander feels abandoned and pushes even harder, which triggers more withdrawal. After a few rounds, you stop seeing your partner and start seeing an opponent. The demander becomes clingy. The withdrawer becomes cold. Neither label is true or helpful. You're not broken. You're caught in a machine you both built without meaning to. The real move is spotting when you're in it, not during a fight, but in the quiet moments after. Ask yourself, am I reaching out from love or from fear? Am I giving space from health or from hurt? Neither position is wrong until it becomes a pattern neither of you chose. The couples who break this cycle don't do it by demanding less or withdrawing less. They do it by interrupting the rhythm itself. A text that says, I notice I'm pushing. A moment where the quiet person speaks first. A question instead of a demand. A lean in instead of a fade. Small enough to start, brave enough to matter. Fundamental attribution error in conflict. Your person cancels plans last minute and you think they don't care about me, they're selfish, they never prioritize us. But when you cancel, it's because work blew up, your mom called with stress, the day was impossible. Context, circumstance, survival. When they cancel, you skip straight to character. That gap between how you judge yourself and how you judge them is the whole game. Psychologists call it fundamental attribution error, and it lives quietly in every relationship that doesn't make it. When your partner snaps at you, your brain writes a story about who they are as a person. When you snap, your brain writes a story about what happened to you. Same action, two completely different explanations. And because you never see your own invisible pressures, the fatigue, the fear, the old wound they just triggered, you assume their behavior means something true about their soul. Over time, this hardens into fact. A forgotten text becomes proof of neglect. A late reply becomes evidence of distance. A sarcastic comment becomes a referendum on whether they actually like you. You start collecting these moments like receipts, building a legal case that this person is fundamentally not right for you, when really you're just refusing to imagine their interior life. Here's what shifts things. The next time you're tempted to judge their character, pause and ask what invisible pressure might be crushing them. What circumstance can't you see? Then, and this takes real vulnerability, tell them what's actually on you. Not so they fix it, but so they see the full picture instead of just your reaction. That small move from character judgment to context curiosity is often the difference between a relationship that quietly dies and one that actually deepens into something real. Actor-observer asymmetry excuses. You cancel plans last minute and think, I'm exhausted, it's been a brutal week. Your date cancels on you and you think they don't care enough to try. Notice the difference? When you mess up, you blame the situation. When they mess up, you blame their character. That's actor-observer asymmetry, and it's quietly poisoning how you interpret the person you're trying to like. When you're the actor, you're surrounded by context, the pressures, the bad sleep, the thing that happened earlier that day. You feel the weight of circumstances pressing down, but when you're the observer watching someone else, you don't see their invisible struggles. You see only the action. So a late reply becomes, they're not interested. A forgotten detail becomes, they weren't listening. A canceled date becomes, I'm not a priority. The real trap is that you're comparing your most honest, circumstantial self to their most visible, minimal self. You're playing the game with different scorecards, judging them on character while judging yourself on context. Here's what actually helps. Next time they disappoint you, pause and ask what you'd want them to assume about you if positions flipped. What invisible pressure might they be under? What if the story you're telling yourself is missing half the plot? That small reframe won't excuse real neglect or patterns of carelessness, but it will stop you from building a case against someone based on incomplete evidence. And it might let you actually see them, the real version, instead of the shadow your bias created. Empathic accuracy over confidence. You're texting someone you're into, and halfway through their response, you already know what they're really feeling. You can read between the lines, right? That certainty, that sense that you've cracked their emotional code is almost always an illusion. Most of us believe we're better at guessing what others think and feel than we actually are, especially early on when we're infatuated and our brains are basically running on dopamine and projection. The danger isn't that you read them wrong once, it's that you stop asking. You assume they're upset when they're tired, or that they're pulling away when they're just distracted by work, and you start adjusting your behavior based on a story you invented. Meanwhile, they're confused because they never said any of that. Your mind did. Research shows that even the people we're closest to often have only slightly better empathic accuracy than strangers. And that gap actually shrinks even more when emotion runs high and the stakes feel biggest. Here's the sticky part. The more you care about someone, the more your brain fills in blanks with what you hope or fear rather than what's actually true. The antidote isn't becoming a mind reader. It's staying curious enough to ask the thing that feels obvious to you. When you feel certain about someone's inner world, that's often the exact moment to say it out loud and let them confirm or correct you. It sounds simple, maybe even boring, but it's the difference between building a relationship with a real person and falling in love with the version you constructed in the dark. Curse of knowledge in intimacy. You know what you want in bed, what touches work, what words land like honey, so you assume your partner knows it too or should figure it out by now. This gap between what you know and what they know is the curse of knowledge, and it's quietly sabotaging more relationships than miscommunication ever could. The trap is slippery. The more familiar you are with your own desires, the harder it becomes to imagine not knowing them. You forget that nobody lives inside your skin. Your partner isn't withholding or indifferent. They're working with incomplete information and guessing wrong because they can't read minds. A touch that feels obvious to you reads as uncertain to them. A preference you've never mentioned feels like rejection when you pull away. The cruelest part is that you end up punishing them for failing a test they didn't know they were taking. So here's what actually works. Stop assuming and start narrating. Not clinical, not uncomfortable, just real. I like it when you, or that doesn't work for me, but this does, or even I've been thinking about. These small articulations collapse the gap. Your partner gets to stop guessing. You get to stop resenting them for not being psychic. Intimacy stops being a performance where one person knows the script and the other improvises blind. The hardest part isn't saying it, it's believing that naming what you need isn't weakness. It's the thing that deepens it, turns it from guesswork into actual knowledge. Sunk cost in dying relationships. 5 years in, and the happiness died around year 3. But you stay because you've invested so much already. The vacations, the inside jokes, the friends you introduce them to, the time bleeding away. That calculus is a trap, and it deserves naming. The sunk cost fallacy whispers, if you leave now, all that time becomes wasted. So you throw good months after bad ones, hoping the past investment will somehow justify staying. It never works that way. The years you spent were real and valuable, and they end the same whether you walk out today or in 2 more years of quiet resentment. What changes is how many more mornings you spend in a bed that feels empty. Here's what makes this poisonous in romance. Love gets tangled with obligation. You feel guilty for throwing away what you built, as if leaving is the same as erasing it. It's not. Every good moment you had was real. It happened. It shaped you. Leaving doesn't unhappen any of it. The hard part is accepting that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is admit that the relationship has already ended emotionally and you're just living in the fossil. If you catch yourself staying primarily because leaving feels wasteful, that's the signal you need to hear. Not all losses are failures. Sometimes the bravest move is to honor what was good, grieve it cleanly, and make space for something that actually fits. Your sunk time deserves better than a mausoleum. Endowment effect on partners. You buy a jacket you've never worn. 6 months later, someone offers you double what you paid. Your gut says no, not because the money isn't real, but because you own it now. That jacket feels irreplaceable in your hands, even though it's identical to the one in the store. That's the endowment effect, and it's ruthless in relationships. The moment you begin dating someone, your brain starts inflating their value, not because they changed, because they're yours. A text that would feel ordinary from a stranger feels tender. An inside joke feels sacred. A small kindness feels like proof of character. And here's where it gets sticky. That overvaluation is not harmless warmth. It blinds you. You overlook red flags because your mind has already decided this person is scarce and special. You ignore compatibility gaps because ownership has made the gap feel smaller than it is. Worse, you're now locked into defending your choice. Admitting they're flawed feels like admitting you made a bad purchase. So you rationalize, explain away, stay longer than the evidence supports. The endowment effect doesn't fade when relationships end either. It lingers as nostalgia. You remember them as rarer than they were, which is why getting over someone takes so much longer than logic would predict. The antidote is small but unglamorous. Before you decide someone is irreplaceable, ask yourself what you would think of them if you hadn't met them yet. That distance, that tiny reality check, is often enough to see what you actually have versus what you've inflated them into being. Loss aversion, breakup asymmetry. Watch any breakup closely enough and you'll notice something almost nobody talks about. The person who ends it usually feels lighter within weeks, while the person who was left keeps drowning for months. Same rupture, completely different recovery timelines, and it's not because one person loved harder. It's pure neuroscience wrapped in timing. When you decide to leave, you don't actually leave once. You leave 100 times in your head first. During the fights that turned cold, the mornings that felt hollow, the moment you stopped trying, you've been grieving the relationship in installments, preparing your brain for the loss long before you say the words out loud. By the time you walk out, you've already done your goodbye accounting. Relief floods in because pretending is finally over. But the person being left gets sandbagged by a loss they never saw coming, and that's where loss aversion flips the script. Your brain weights losses about twice as heavily as equivalent gains. Losing $10 stings more than finding 10 feels good. Being rejected doesn't just sting, it stings asymmetrically because your brain never got the memo. No slow grief, no mental rehearsal, just sudden absence. The shock compounds the pain in ways the dumper will never experience. So if you're the one who jumped first, understanding this matters. The person you left will probably hurt longer than you do, and that's not fragility, it's wiring. The extended pain isn't a character flaw, it's how human brains are built to experience loss. The person who chooses the door always lands softer than the one pushed through it. Ostrich effect in commitment. Your partner mentions they feel taken for granted. Instead of leaning in, you reach for your phone, pivot to weekend plans, or suddenly remember that work email that cannot wait. That sideways move, the deliberate not looking, is the ostrich effect, and it's woven into far more long-term relationships than people want to admit. The myth says ostriches bury their heads in sand when threatened. Commitment works the same way, except the sand is routine, humor, and strategic silence. Naming the issue feels risky, like it might crack something fragile, so you don't. 2 years in, 3 years in, 5 years in, avoidance becomes reflex. The tension drops temporarily. You both move forward, but the conversation never actually moves through you. It just pools underneath, collecting similar conversations you never had, small resentments you never voiced, until what started as one uncomfortable moment becomes a whole canyon of unspoken weight. And here's the trap. Avoidance genuinely works in the moment. The discomfort lifts. Life resumes. That short-term win is exactly why we keep doing it, even though we are essentially choosing comfort over connection. The couples who actually build something durable are the ones who interrupt the pattern, who stop scrolling mid-sentence and say, I want to circle back to what you said, not to solve it immediately, but to refuse the pretense that it isn't there. The next time you feel that urge to deflect, try something smaller. Name the thing quietly, even just to yourself. You do not need to fix it that day. You just need to stop making it invisible.